ENSNARED, a vampire blood courtesan's romance. Chapter 1. Panic clawed my chest. I started awake, my heart hammering like a wild thing. What was I going to do? The bar where I'd been waitressing had closed last month, and I hadn't been able to find a new job. I had enough to pay May's rent, but that would leave me less than $100 for food and utilities, and I'd still have to come up with the rent for June. I gazed around me, picking out shapes in the early morning light. I rented an attic in a row house on Baltimore's east side. My apartment was basically one large room with a kitchen at one end, my bed at the other, and 3 tall dormer windows in the middle. It was cramped, but it was mine and I loved it. From the sloping ceiling that I'd painted sky blue to the sunny yellow walls, my gaze fell on the row of paintings along one wall. My paintings. Maybe they weren't any good, but they were all I had in the world. I rolled onto my side and closed my eyes, but my mind was racing like a hamster on the wheel. After a few minutes I gave up trying to fall back asleep. Pulling on a hoodie, I crept down the 2 flights of stairs past my landlord's apartment and out the front door. The sun wasn't up yet, but it was already warm outside, a hint of the humid Maryland summer to come. As I sat down on the front stoop, a soft bread-dawn haze spread over the line of formstone row houses that marched up my street. On a nearby roof, a robin was singing to its mate, and a squirrel sent me an inquisitive look from the trunk of a scrubby street tree. At least if I lost the apartment, I wouldn't freeze. But what would happen to my paintings? Panic grabbed me again. I hugged my knees and told myself that something would turn up. Suddenly the robin went silent as if it had been choked in mid-note. The squirrel froze and then whisked itself into the tree branches. Every hair on my body stood straight up. I looked carefully around me. There, a dark swirl in the shadows at the end of the block dot, and then a man emerged like a grim, powerful magician. Across the street, my neighbor was jogging down her stoop. She glanced his way and did a double take, but the man was looking at me. My breath hitched. He was gorgeous, broad shoulders, black hair that curled over his collar, and a face too beautiful to be real. He and his sleek charcoal suit stood out in my working-class neighborhood like a Ferrari in a sea of Fords. Wariness skittered up my spine. He was too out of place. Rich, gorgeous men didn't walk down our street, ever, and they didn't stare as if they knew me or wanted to. I dragged my gaze from him and waited for him to pass. Footsteps, soft and unhurried on the sidewalk. Then a low, seductive voice. Good morning, cheery. I knew enough French to know he'd called me dear or sweetheart. I shouldn't have liked it, but damn, it was sexy, especially with his faint European accent. Desire curled through me. Warm and unexpected. I scowled and returned his greeting curtly. His nostrils flared, almost like he'd scented that curl of desire. His gaze traveled down my body, lingering on my bare legs. I glared at him and deliberately tugged the hem of my hoodie lower to cover my thighs. His gaze snapped back to my face. This close, he was even more beautiful, but in a chilly, glittering way. His eyes coal black save for an odd rim of silver blue around the pupils. Time stopped. I stilled, entranced by that shock of color. Who are you? A dark murmur that stroked my skin like phantom fingers. He was 5 feet away, but it felt like he was looming over me. I moved a shoulder. No, he said. You are most definitely someone. A very beautiful someone. I swallowed. I knew I should go inside, but something kept me there, staring up at him. A rabbit hypnotized by a wolf. He tilted his head. I'm making you uncomfortable. I'm sorry. That is not my intention. I wrenched my ass off the stoop and stood up. That was better. I was on the second step so he didn't loom over me. But now I was looking directly into his odd eyes. They seemed to glow in the dim light. I gulped and took an involuntary step back. My heels hit the marble rise behind me. He put out a hand. Don't be afraid. I lifted my chin. I'm not. None. You have no reason to fear me. I promise. I moved a shoulder. He frowned. I have to go. But I would like to know you better. I may take you to dinner. Perhaps dinner with you? I shook my head. I don't think so. I'll give you cab fare, he said. You will meet me at the restaurant. What do you say? No, thank you. I promise you may leave whenever you wish. You will be perfectly safe, please. He gave me a winning smile. Put like that, it sounded almost reasonable. And if nothing else, I'd get a free dinner. But something made me shake my head. Thanks for the invite, but, star. His voice stopped me in the act of edging up the stairs. He set a black boot on the bottom step and leaned forward. Why fight it? Fight what? But my heart was thundering so hard I barely heard my own words. This. He touched the pulse hammering in the hollow of my throat. His breath caught and he stared fixedly at my neck. I swayed towards him. He leaned closer and I found myself raising my mouth to his. It was as if he really was a magician working some powerful spell on me. Stop it. I pushed his hand away. Whatever you're doing, stop it right now. His gaze sharpened and I felt his will like a physical thing, beating against mine. I narrowed my eyes. I mean it, I said in a low, hard voice. My landlords are right inside. Get away from me or I'll scream so loud the whole fucking neighborhood will come down on you. The man's brows snapped together. And then, just like that, whatever he was doing stopped. He stepped back. You're right. This isn't the time or place. My chest heaved. It will never be the time or place. None. I want you, Cheery. I promise I will make it worth your while. He put his hands in his pants pockets and regarded me through hooded eyes. It took me a few seconds to realize what he meant. Then I gasped. Emotions chased through me. Anger, outrage, and temptation. God help me. Why not? A sly voice asked. Because I was broke, and with this man, maybe it wouldn't be such a bad way to make money. But would I ever be able to look myself in the eye again? And what would my mom have said? Shame twisted my stomach. Get the hell out of here. I gritted. Now, he quirked a dark brow. As you say, star. A bent dot. Have a good day. And with a parting nod, he sauntered back the way he came. I walked backward up the final 2 steps, afraid to turn my back on him, until my butt hit the front door. I yanked it open and darted inside. It was only then that I realized he knew my name. Chapter 2, Rumi. I settled into the limo and waited as my right-hand man, Malik, shut the door and took a seat next to the chauffeur. By all the dark skies, I wanted the pretty little human. It had been a long time since I'd scented blood as sweet as hers. I craved her freshness, that spark that made her stand up to me even when her frantically beating heart signaled her fear. Her very youth was an aphrodisiac. Too bad she'd made it clear she wasn't for sale. I was an old, powerful vampire. If I could compel the woman to do anything, I damned well pleased. But what would be the fun in that? I saw her again in my mind's eye. Dark, shiny hair, golden skin that hinted of an Asian ancestor, soft curves and strong legs that would wrap round my hips as I brought my mouth to her lovely throat. My fangs lengthened. I shifted, the thought of feeding from her as I thrust deep inside her tight little passage making me hard. Patience, I told myself. Patience. For now, I would have to wait, but not long. because I would have her. What had made me catch her scent from a block away? Why had I cracked the limo window at just the right moment? I shrugged. These things happened. A wise man didn't question them. The limo pulled out into the early morning traffic, heading toward the inner harbor and my hotel. Get her, I told Malik in French. He glanced over his shoulder. Monsieur Malik was a member of an Algerian French family that had served me for decades. He would do anything for me, up to and including murder. He'd even taken a bullet for me, which, although it wouldn't have killed me, would have weakened me at a crucial moment. I'd rewarded him by giving him a few drops of my blood, saving his life and creating a blood bond between us. Not that any of my employees would dare betray me, but Malik had my absolute trust. The young woman on the stoop. I have chosen her to be my next blood courtesan. Her first name is Star. I'd plucked the name from her mind. I gave Malik the address and he noted it in his phone. But be clever, I added. I want her to believe she has a choice, of course. We both knew he would engineer it so she had no choice at all. I sat back, satisfied, and watched from behind black-tinted windows as the sun rose over Baltimore. Chapter 3. Star. He was there, watching me from my table in the corner. Tall, dark and scary with an accent. What the foo? This was a small, shady gambling club, very much under the radar, play by invitation only. How had he gotten past the doorman? Unless he was a gangster like most of the other patrons. Around me there was the gruff sound of men playing cards at the 8 tables spaced around the room. There were only 2 games at Oakley's, poker and blackjack, played with $100 bills, not chips, per house rules. His gaze went over me, taking in my uniform, crisp white shirt, short red skirt and fuck me scarlet heels. My nape prickled, my fingers curled around the round tray in my hands. Hey, girl, can we get our fucking drinks already? I wrenched my focus back to the 3 lethal-looking men playing at the table next to me. The dealer, a 30-something woman as hard-eyed as the men, paid me no mind. Her gaze fixed on the big blonde scowling at me, of course. Sorry, sir. I moved around the table, setting a whiskey beside each man. The blonde's jacket stretched over his massive frame as he tossed back the whiskey in one gulp and then tapped the table. Hit me, and you. He jerked his head at me. Stay right where you are. The other 2 men called, and the big blonde one. The dealer pushed the cash towards him, and he added the bills to his stack without so much as a glance at them. I blinked. The man had won close to $30,000, more than I'd made all last year, and he acted like it was nothing. The blonde lifted a hand and crooked a thick finger at me. Here, babe. He tucked a folded $100 bill into my neckline. Get me and the boys here another whiskey. The folded bill scratched as he shoved it deeper. His hand slid under my bra, grazing my nipple. I stiffened and clenched my jaw as his calloused fingers abraded my skin. Sure thing, boss. I forced a wink, but I could have sworn the dark man in the corner growled. No one else seemed to have heard. But then, at Oakley's, if you had any brains, you minded your own business. As I wove through the tables to the bar, my gaze returned to him as if he was some kind of human magnet. Tonight he was all in black, his suit, his shirt. He even had on a narrow black tie. The round lamp hanging from a chain over his table illuminated only his hands and the lower part of his face, leaving the rest of him in the shadows. As I passed his table, he glanced up and I caught a flash of silver blue. I faltered and almost lost my balance in those damn high heels. Then he shuttered his gaze and faded back into the shadows as if willing himself to disappear. I swallowed and continued to the bar to place the drink order. I didn't wonder how he'd find me so easily. For a man like that, it was child's play. He knew where I lived, and he apparently knew my name. If he wanted, he could probably dig up things about me that even my best friends didn't know, like that my bank account was as empty as a church on Monday and that I was alone in the world except for my landlords, a gay couple I'd met at the last bar I'd worked at, a few friends and a father I hoped never to see again. Hell, he probably even knew that I hated milk but loved cheese and had a tattoo on my left hip. This job had been an answer to a prayer. My friend Jane L. had called out of the blue to tell me the club where she worked was looking for a cocktail waitress. The owner only hires hot young things, she said. Well, I was young, anyway, 24. I didn't know about hot. The money is effing incredible, Jane L. added. I'm in. Ms. Jones, the elegant African-American woman who interviewed me, looked me over with a professional eye. You could use a haircut, but you have nice eyes, and your body will do. I ignored the body remark to drag a hand over my straight black hair. I can get it cut. Good. Get a swing cut. It will show off those big green eyes. The men will eat it up, especially with your skin. They like variety. What are you, anyway? You have a Spanish last name, but you look more Asian. I'm Filipina, half. My mom was American by way of Croatia. Ah, that explains the ethnic look. Excellent. Like I said, the men will eat you up. We try to have something for every taste. I shifted uneasily. Lord knew I needed this job. But what had Jane L. gotten me into? We'd been friends ever since we were teens after meeting in a homeless shelter during a bad time for both of us. We'd even been roommates for a year. But now I belatedly recalled that when I'd last seen her 2 months ago, she'd been clinging to a big brute of a man with a gang tattoo running down the side of his neck. I'm not for sale, I blurted. My body. I mean, no? She asked, not unkindly. Everyone has their price, not me. Suit yourself, she said with a shrug. We leave it up to the girls. Now, tell me about your experience. I understand you've worked as a cocktail waitress before. A few minutes later, she came to her feet and offered me her hand. The job's yours. Star. Jane L. and her boyfriend had vouched for me, and apparently that was good enough. I wasn't stupid. I knew Oakley's wasn't strictly legal. It sure as hell wasn't a licensed casino, and to enter it, I'd had to let them pat me down through weapons and a wire. But beggars couldn't be choosers. It wasn't until the first night that I'd realized that half the members belonged to the same gang as Jane L.'s friend. But Miss Jones had told me what the waitresses averaged in tips, and I realized that in a single evening I'd make as much as I made in a whole week at my last job. I figured I'd stay for a few months, earn enough to buy a used car and a few other necessities, like the art supplies I craved like some people did drugs, and then move on. Here you go, Star. The bartender, Zeke, placed 3 whiskeys on the counter. I returned to the blonde bastard's table with the drinks to find his stack of money gone save for a single $100 bill. I fought not to smile as he rose to his feet. I'm going to find a luckier table. He grabbed his whiskey and stalked off. I served the other 2 men and then moved on to my next table. In the corner, Jane L. was waiting on tall, dark and Scary's table. Jane L. was the kind of woman men stared at. Big eyes, smooth coffee skin, and a long, sexy body. But the man barely glanced at her. simply took the glass of wine and raised it to me. I jerked my gaze away. Antoine, the owner's second in command, appeared out of nowhere behind me. Mr. Oakley wants to see you. Star. Me? Why? Antoine simply looked back, his dark face carved in stone. Okay. I looked around for somewhere to put my tray. Antoine jerked his head at Janelle. Take it. Yes, sir. She hurried forward and took the tray without looking at me. Not that I was surprised. If the Titanic was sinking, Janelle would be the first on a lifeboat. My gaze darted to the man in the corner. He was examining his cards, but I knew, with a gut-deep certainty, that he was aware of what was happening. I could feel it. Antoine grabbed my arm and propelled me toward the hall at the back of the club. Something about the way he was handling me made me wonder if I should try and make a run for it. But I told myself not to be silly. Why would I be in trouble? In the week I'd been at Oakley's club, I'd done my damnedest to be a model employee, showing up early and pitching in with any work that needed doing. We walked down the hall to Oakley's lair, and it was a lair, dark green ceiling, rich cherry walls, expensive leather furniture, and Oakley at the center like a spider in his web. The door was open. Antoine jerked his head, indicating I should go first. Oakley was at his big-ass black and cherry desk. He never looked up from his computer screen. He was average size, with light brown skin and a tough, lean frame, but the man gave off power like some kind of human generator. He glared at his keyboard and typed something, then swore under his breath and unleashed an attack on the keys. I chewed my lower lip and tried not to shift from foot to foot as I waited for him to notice me. Never let them see you're scared. I'd learned that a long time ago, after my mom died and my dad tried the same shit on me that he had on her. He was bigger and faster than me, so the only way to avoid a beating was to stand up to him. Sometimes it even worked. So, Star. Oakley set his elbows on the desk and tapped his long fingers together. I understand you have something of mine. His voice was calm and so cold I felt the chill from 2 yards away. My stomach twisted. Stay cool. Don't admit anything. I beg your pardon, sir. I hated that I sounded scared, but damn it, I was scared. Suddenly Antoine was right behind me. My spine crawled. I drew in my shoulders and edged forward, hands clamped onto my arms, holding me where I was. What's up? I asked Oakley. I swear I didn't do anything. He regarded me over tented fingers. The only thing I like less than a thief is a liar, even a pretty liar like you. His eyes raked my body. Thick panic clogged my throat. I swallowed hard. What do you mean, a thief? Why would I take anything? I want this job. I need it. Bad. Oakley glanced at Antoine, who spun me around and backhanded me across the face so hard a white flash exploded in my head. The next blow knocked me to my knees. I curled myself into a ball, but Antoine grabbed my hair and yanked me up. This time, the blow split my lip. Antoine raised his hand and I broke, cowering at his feet. Stop it, please. I swear I didn't. That's enough, Oakley said in a bored voice. Antoine jerked me upright and wrenched me around to face Oakley. My face was throbbing, and when I touched my tongue to my lower lip, I tasted blood. My breath was shuddering in and out. But I stood as tall as I could and tried to face him calmly. I had a feeling my life depended on it. Well? Oakley demanded. What did you do with it? I told you, I said as forcefully as I could. I don't know what you're talking about. You're good. Oakley leaned back and kept my gaze. I almost believe you, that we caught you on camera. He spun his screen to face me and tapped an icon. I stared, dumbfounded, as a woman turned her head, scanned the corridor, and shoved something into her backpack before slipping out the club's back door. A woman who looked exactly like me. Oakley paused the video to show me the timestamp. It was dated last night, a little after 4 a.m., the same time I'd been leaving through the front door with Janelle and Zeke. I swallowed sickly. That's not me. I swear it's not me. I didn't even come into this hall last night. Oakley slammed his open palm onto the desk and I flinched. Enough. He rose from the chair, his expression dangerous. I don't know how you did it, but nobody fucks with Mark Oakley. I want that cash on my desk by the time the club opens tomorrow night, or we're going to have another talk, and the next time I won't be so nice. I twisted my hands together. But I swear, that's not me. I don't care what it looks like. I never went near the back door last night. Ask Janelle, ask Zeke. I went out with them. That has to be on video too, right? We did ask them. Neither of them knows for sure. Janelle says you went to the bathroom around then, and the video of you leaving is 10 minutes later. It proves nothing. No. I shook my head slowly from side to side. It's a setup. It has to be. Why would have I come back tonight? Because you would have been the #1 suspect if you didn't. God, what a nightmare. I met Oakley's eyes. All I can say is that it's not me. I swear it's not. You have to believe me. His mouth twisted. You're still saying you don't have the money? Because I don't. Antoine grabbed my arm and jerked it behind my back. Pain shot to my shoulder. I whimpered and came up on my toes to try and relieve the pressure. The truth, he growled. No more lies. A sob escaped my lips. Okay, I'll tell you anything you want. Just let me go. He eased the pressure slightly. How much? I asked Oakley. His eyes narrowed. All of it, bitch. But let's say 100 thou. That covers the interest, too. My stomach dropped. 100,000? You mean dollars? What else would I mean? He growled, and I want it by tomorrow night, or you're a dead woman. Now get the fuck out of here. I'm a busy man. He turned back to his computer. I stared at him, dazed, until Antoine grabbed my upper arms and frog marched me toward the door. And Star? Oakley asked in a soft voice. I stilled. Yes, don't even think about running, because I'll track you down, and you don't want to find out what happens to people who rip me off. Chapter 4. Star. Fucking little thief. Antoine threw me into the alley behind the club. I landed on my hands and knees. A few seconds later, my backpack hit the asphalt beside me. I pushed my way back to my feet, grabbed the backpack and wobbled down the alley as fast as I could in those frigging high heels. $100,000. I had only gone a few yards when my ankle twisted. It was too much. Hot tears pricked my eyes. I dropped the backpack, leaned against the chain link fence that ran down one side of the alley and pressed my balled fists into my stomach. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? $100,000? I couldn't raise that much money in 10 years, let alone by tomorrow. And the hell of it was, the money was nothing to Oakley. He took in 4 or 5 times that every night. One thing was sure. I had to get the hell out of Baltimore. They might think they could catch me, but I was good at hiding, and I'd be damned if I'd make it easy for them. But God, I'd have to leave my paintings behind, and the last of my art supplies. Tears dripped down my face. I gulped and wrapped my arms around my abdomen. Deep breath. Star. Now another. I was so focused on holding it together that I didn't hear anything until a shadow fell across my feet. I jerked and snapped upright. It was him, the watcher from the club. What there? I looked around, wild-eyed. How did you know I was out here? I followed you. I blinked. Yeah, well, Good for you. Now get the hell out of here. Without taking my gaze from him, I bent down and felt for my pepper spray in the front pocket of my backpack. He raised a hand. Star, calm down. I want only to help. I palmed the canister. I don't need your kind of help. His gaze went to the pepper spray. I wouldn't do that if I were you. I froze. Something in his voice made me want to obey. I shook myself. The hell with that. I turned the nozzle, unlocking the spray. Go away. I held the canister out with a shaking hand. Or I'll spray this in your fucking eyes. I swear I will. He stepped back and considered me like I was an interesting puzzle. Calm yourself, he said in a low tone that stroked over my nerves like velvet. I want only to speak with you. You're upset. Calm down and listen to me. I promise. I mean you no harm. I brought the pepper spray down to my side. I might as well hear the man out. Even if I sprayed him, he had me cornered, because a silver limo had stopped at the end of the alley, blocking the entrance. Okay. I gulped in a breath. Talk. He stepped a little closer and examined my face. His black eyes flashed. The bastard's damaged you. I moved a shoulder. Was it Oakley? I pressed my lips together. Snitching would just make it worse. Besides, what could he do? Tell me. A cold, hard voice. Our gazes snagged. His eyes bored into mine. Once again, I felt that strange urge to obey him. I wrenched my gaze from his and rested my throbbing cheek against the fence's chilly metal circles. Just go away, please. The hiss of breath made my nape tighten. He touched my face with a single finger, but somehow my head turned so I was looking right into his eyes. Tell me, Antoine, there, are you happy? I pushed his hand away. It was fucking Antoine. And Oakley, does he know? A bark of laughter escaped my throat. Who do you think gave the order? He was right there watching. I see. His elegant jaw worked. Well, don't worry. I'll give you the money. Ma Petite. Who said anything about money? I heard what happened. I know you need money right away. Why? I narrowed my eyes. I don't care if you're rich as God. Why the hell would you give me money? His gaze went to my cheek. Let's say I hate to see marks on such a pretty little thing. Thanks, but no thanks. I'd never be able to. He sliced a hand, cutting me off. How much? I pressed my lips together and then shrugged. 100,000. Like he would give me that much. Very well. He whipped out a cell phone and I listened, open-mouthed, as he directed that $100,000 be sent to Oakley's account in my name. He ended the call and looked at me. There, he will have the money within an hour. Jesus. I gaped at him. I can't let you do that. There's no way I can pay you back. It is done. You're serious. You will learn I'm not a joking man. I shook my head. I don't know what to say, except I'll pay you back. I swear I will. I don't know how, but I will. His gaze fastened on my mouth. He inhaled slowly. You're bleeding. I swiped my free hand over my mouth and looked at the smear of blood, then back at him. My heart pounded. Slow, hard beats. Suspicion sprouted, grew roots. He was staring so intently at that faint red smear, without taking my gaze from his. I rubbed my hands on my skirt. I have a way for you to pay me back, he murmured, and it'll only take you a month. My mouth twisted. I should have known there was a catch. I'll bet you do. Thanks, but no thanks. Would it be so bad? He stepped closer. My heart kicked into high gear. I tightened my grip on the pepper spray at my side. Become a courtesan. That deep, velvety tone again. My courtesan. You're what? My courtesan. I promise. I'll treat you like a princess. I shook my head. Nobody talked like that anymore, except, oh, Lord, those eyes. the way I'd never seen him in full daylight, the interest in my blood. His tongue swiped over his lips, and I caught the glint of sharp white teeth. The pepper spray fell to the pavement with a small thunk. "You're a vampire," I said flatly. I don't know why it took me so long to figure it out, but people like me don't run into vampires. They're dark, dangerous, rich, and I mean Bill Gates rich. Give someone hundreds of years to invest, and pretty much anyone can get wealthy. But vamps are reclusive, and most of them could care less about humans, except when they need to feed. He inclined his head. "I am, and you mean a blood courtesan." The shadow world of vampires existed alongside the humans, but mostly we left each other alone, except the vamps needed blood, and they loved sex. Combine the two, and it gave them a high like drugs for a human. Me. Ooh. He took my hand and brought it to his lips. "I'll make it good for you, Star. I swear, all you have to give me is 1 month. Is that so bad?" He brushed his mouth over the inside of my wrist. His lips were firm and cool. A zing went straight up my arm. I tugged my hand from his, but damn, I was tempted, because vampire or no, he was the hottest man I'd ever met, and a month wasn't so long. But a blood courtesan? I shook my head. No. To my surprise, he didn't argue. "It is your choice, Star. You can pay me the cash if you prefer. I'll give you a year, and I won't charge interest. No one can say I'm not a fair man. Like hell, this was anything but fair, and we both knew it." I dragged a hand through my hair, trying to see a way out of this, but there wasn't. I couldn't come up with $100,000 in a year, probably not even 10 years. It was either a month with this man, this vampire, or I'd have to leave Baltimore for good. Even with the money I'd made the past week, I'd have less than $500 to travel on, and in a year, the vampire would come looking for me, and somehow I had a feeling he'd find me. I moistened my lips. The vampire's gaze went to my mouth, lingered. "I'll throw in a bonus," he added. I shook my head, but I was weakening. "I don't even know your name. I beg your pardon." He gave a small, courtly bow. "I am called Remy de la Lune, Remy of the Moon." How appropriate. I wondered when he'd last seen the sunlight. I had a feeling it hadn't been for a long, long time. "And I'm Star Salazar, but you know that." He inclined his head. "Enchanté, mademoiselle." We stared at each other. A few yards away an alley cat snarled, and on a nearby street a car accelerated with a roar. But here in the alley it was quiet, the two of us illuminated by a single streetlight. "So?" the vampire prompted. "What is your decision?" "A month, you swear that's it? No tricks or hidden clauses?" His eyes flashed in the gloom. "You doubt my word?" "Not exactly. Well, I was, actually, but it seemed smart not to insult him. But I need to know what I'm agreeing to." I was damned if I was going to let a vampire railroad me into a lifetime enthralled to him. He stepped closer and set a hand on the fence beside my head. With the other, he stroked the side of my throat. My pulse jumped, and his smile deepened. The SOB knew I was a lot more uncertain and afraid than I was letting on. His face was just inches from mine. I inhaled shakily and was surprised to find he smelled good. "Dark, earthy male." "1 month," he said. "I swear on my mother's grave." I swallowed. 30 days? 30 days. He agreed. "We will sign a contract, and you will throw in a bonus." He inclined his head. "At the end of that time, if you satisfy me, you'll receive a bonus of $50,000. My eyes widened. 50,000? I'd been thinking more along the lines of 5,000, if that much. "But during that month, you will be completely mine. You will live in my home, obey me in all things, cater only to me." His mouth was against my throat now. I felt the scrape of fangs. My head swam with a dark mixture of fear and excitement. Is that clear? I gripped the fence. I'm not sure about that obey me thing. Remy stilled, and then he laughed. It was an odd, rusty sound, as if it had been years since his vocal cords had known amusement. All right, he said. That one is negotiable. Now enough. Say yes. His hard body pressed against mine, and God help me, it was exciting in a primal way. My fingers tightened on the chain links. Yes, I whispered, and then again in a stronger voice. Yes. Chapter 5. Fangs pricked my throat. I swallowed hard, but made myself stay frozen in place. So sweet, Remy murmured. So very sweet. I closed my eyes and waited tensely for him to feed, but he just pressed a kiss to the soft underside of my jaw. His lips were cool and firm. A tiny zing went through me. My nipples pricked as heat pooled in my lower belly. Not here, he said against my skin, but soon. I shivered, and he squeezed my shoulders. Don't be so scared. It will be good for you. I promise. I'm not scared, I replied automatically, because I wasn't, or at least, it wasn't just fear. I was wary and aroused and curious, too. None? He scrutinized me and then with a small shrug, said, Of course you aren't. He held out his hand. Let's go then. I got my backpack and gave him my hand. He kissed the back of it, a light butterfly touch, and then led me down the alley to the limo. A man in a dark suit who looked like an escapee from an MMA ring got out on the passenger side and opened the back door for us. I set one foot in the limo and halted, hand on the doorframe, looking from the chauffeur to the MMA look-alike to Remy. 3 men, all of whom looked like they could snap my neck without breaking a sweat, and me. Suddenly fear was my chief emotion. My lungs constricted. What was I doing? This man was a vampire, and I was about to go off with him and his 2 goons. I gripped the doorframe and looked wildly around. It is your choice. Remy's voice was even. Until you sign the contract, you can change your mind. This I swear to you on my honor as a de la Lune, right? I expelled a breath and, reminding myself that I had no choice, got inside. As the chauffeur eased the limo onto the street, Remy spoke to the large man riding shotgun. Malik, you have directed that Oakley be paid? Oui, monsieur, he should have the money by now. Text the information to Star as well. You have her number. Oui. Malik nodded and took out his phone. While they were talking, I looked through my backpack. Antoine had rifled through it, but he hadn't taken anything. My fingers closed on my cell phone like it was a lifeline. At least I could call 911 if things got bad. Sure, the police were no match for a vampire, but I was pretty sure there was some kind of human-vampire treaty that meant Remy would be in deep shit if he killed a cop. My companion raised a single black brow. Calm yourself, Star. For the last time, you aren't in any danger. My face heated, but I didn't release my grip on the phone. What are you? A mind reader? Remy shrugged and changed the subject. You won't need to go home, he said, looking me up and down with a practiced eye. He was too polite to say anything. But you didn't have to be a genius to know my outfit wasn't up to his standards. I will supply everything you need. But what about my apartment? I had a deal with my landlords where I paid cash in return for a $50 reduction on the rent. I can't just leave for 30 days. I have to pay my rent on June 1st. If I don't, I'll lose everything. Remy waved a long-fingered hand. Contact your landlords. Tell them they will be paid as usual. I called Jim, the more laid-back of the couple. It was after 2 in the morning, so he didn't answer. but I left a message explaining I had a job offer that was taking me away for a month. I'll make sure you get the June rent, I promised with a glance at Remy. He nodded, and I continued, just please leave everything where it is. That taken care of. I put the phone back into my pack. I didn't care about my things so much as the paintings. They represented months of work. I didn't just paint. I glued objects to the canvas, ripped up photos and attached them here and there. The result was big, crazy-colored paintings, each at least a yard high and a couple of yards across. Someday I was going to get up the courage to show them to a gallery owner. First, the contract, Remy said. That will make you feel safer. Yes, it will, thank you. The tension in my shoulders eased a bit. Our first stop was outside an elegant brick townhouse in Bolton Hill. Remy led the way up the steps. The interior was huge, with those pre-war details that people love. High ceilings, hardwood floors, arched windows and a marble fireplace in the large front room where Remy took me. A tall blonde who could have doubled for Samantha from Sex in the City rose to greet us. I took in her perfect hair, perfect makeup and sexy little champagne-colored dress, and smothered down my skirt, feeling like the thrift shop refugee I was. The blonde gave Remy her hand. He pressed a kiss to the back like he had to mine, but I noticed he released it quickly. You are looking well, Madame Angelique. She inclined her head and turned to me. This is Miss Salazar? Yes, he said, and introduced us, adding, the contract is ready. Angelique frowned. This is most irregular, Monsieur de la Lune. I looked from her to Remy. What did she mean? You know how it works, Angelique continued. I find the girls, and I vet them and send them to our clients. He quirked a single black brow. But for me, you will make an exception. She pursed her lips. It will cost you, no matter, do it, or I will be most unhappy. At the steel in his tone, she stilled. Of course, sir. The vampire turned to me. I will leave you with Madame Angelique now so that she can explain the terms to you. This is acceptable, I nodded. Right then I would have agreed to almost anything. I half believed I was dreaming. From the moment I'd been accused of stealing in Oakley's office, things had gotten stranger and stranger. The silver limo, the money Remy was willing to pay for me, the expensive blonde in her expensive row home, and Remy de la Lune himself, the rich, powerful vamp who was so desperate to have me. I'd crossed my arms over my stomach to calm my uneasiness. Now I pinched my upper arm through the white shirt just to see if I would wake up in my attic on the east side, but nothing happened except that Remy left the room, leaving me with Angelique. Why don't you sit down? She gestured at a pink brocade couch. As I took a seat, I winced. Now that the adrenaline had worn off, I was feeling every blow Antoine had landed. Angelique glanced at my swollen cheek and murmured, I'll be right back. She returned a minute later with a gel ice pack. I'm not going to ask if Remy did that, she said, because while he might be a cold SOB, I've never known him to hit a woman. I pressed the ice pack to my cheek. The throbbing eased a little and I gave a sigh of relief. No, I replied. It wasn't him. Good. I wouldn't think so. But he wants you, bad. And when Remy de la Lune wants something, he gets it. He's lord of the largest clan in France, you know. A vampire count. He rules over 5 governs. Number. I didn't know that. A frigging vampire count? Okay. This was officially Alice in Wonderland, and I'd fallen down the rabbit hole. Madame Angelique took a seat on the opposite side of the couch. There is something I will ask. De la Lune, he hasn't put a compulsion on you? A compulsion? My nape prickled. You mean, force me? Yes or no? No. I shifted the ice pack to another part of my face. I mean, I can't be sure, can I? But he said it was my choice. She gave a satisfied nod. Then he hasn't compelled you. I wouldn't trust any vampire when he's after a blood courtesan, but Rumi's honest, at least for a vampire. If he said it was your choice, then it's true. What's a compulsion? Some vampires, the older, more powerful ones, can compel you to do their will, and he's one of those. Rumi de la Lune is one of the oldest and most powerful vampires in the world. Somehow that didn't surprise me. I recalled that first morning when I'd felt his were beating against mine, and again tonight, when he'd forced me to calm down, although that had been for my own good. Still, I didn't like the idea of him playing mind games with me. I'm pretty sure he's tried it once or twice, I said, but not when he asked me to be his courtesan. Good. Frankly, vampires prefer their woman or man willing. It affects your taste. My taste. I swallowed dryly. Yes, they tell me every human has a slightly different flavor, and a vamp never forgets any of you. Rumi knew from your scent that you and he would be a good match. She smiled, not unkindly. Don't look so scared. Rumi will make sure you enjoy it. Most women tell me they'd have stayed with him longer, but a month is the most he ever books a courtesan. Now she stood up and got 2 thick sheets from her desk. Here's the contract. One for you, and one for Count de la Lune. She kept speaking, and I nodded as if I were paying attention, but I was staring at the contract, handwritten on ivory parchment paper. The words danced before my eyes, but as far as I could tell it covered everything Rumi and I had discussed: the money he'd paid for me, the bonus if I pleased him. In return, I was completely his for the next 30 days, and then I was holding my copy of the contract in my hand. I must have signed it because there was my signature, and a minute later, when Rumi returned, his bolts crawled beneath mine. But I was still taking in the fact that I was prey, something to be tasted, hunted, and instead of running as hard as I could in the opposite direction, I just signed a contract with a hunter. Chapter 6. Rumi. I held in my rage until Star was safely occupied by Angelic. Then I strode back outside to the limo and rapped out Malik's name. He scrambled out of the limo surprisingly fast for a big man and stood at attention, shoulders back, broad face wary. I felt my eyes blaze of vampire blue. What do you have to say for yourself? He gulped. I'm sorry, monsieur. I didn't mean for her to be hurt. My hand latched on his throat. You know I wanted her, I gritted, and you know damn well that meant undamaged. His gaze slid from mine. I'm sorry, he choked out. Sorry isn't good enough. Give me one reason why I shouldn't kill you right here and now. His face was turning red. He clawed at my hand, but I just squeezed harder. I can't, he gasped out, but I swear never again. He was telling the truth. I could tell by his scent, and from the blood bond between us, which allowed me to sense stronger emotions, like right now when Malik reeked of fear, but there was no taint of a lie. I slammed him against the side of the limo and released him. He slumped over, hands on his knees, his large body heaving for breath. I stared down at his shaved head. I'll give you one more chance, I growled, but if it ever happens again, you're dead. Understood? And thank you for your mercy. He came upright and turned his head to one side, offering his neck in silent apology. I made a noise of disgust. You think I want your blood right now? Get back in the limo. The sight of you offends me. Hurt flashed across his face. He hung his head. Yes, sir. And Malik? His gaze shot up to mine. See to Antoine and Oakley. Only an animal hurts a woman like that. But don't kill them. Just make them wish they were dead. Malik nodded eagerly. Of course, sir. As soon as you're safely at the hotel. I inclined my head curtly and walked back inside to find Star perched on the couch in that sexy red skirt that I couldn't wait to remove. I set Malik from my mind and allowed myself a small smile. She was mine. I watched impatiently as she signed the contract and then scrawled my name beneath hers. A dark satisfaction filled me as I ushered her back to the limousine. It had been a long time since I'd wanted anyone that badly, and that in itself was interesting. It had been Malik who arranged for Star to be offered the job at Oakley's, a club where I was a silent partner, and it was Malik who stole the money, then hired a hacker to doctor the security feed so it looked as if it had been Star. I should have anticipated that Oakley's man would rough her up before I realized what was happening. He tossed her into the alley. I'd rushed out of the club and around the side of the building to her. The sight of her leaning brokenly against the fence, her soft skin marked by that bastard's blows, caused an odd twist in the pit of my stomach. It took me a good half-minute to recognize what it was. Guilt. Because no matter what Malik's part in it, Star wouldn't have been in that office in the first place if not for me. I'd paid her debt immediately, and threw in a bonus on top, because guilt, something I hadn't experienced in a long time, was even less pleasant than I remembered. In the front seat, Malik shifted uneasily. He'd failed me, and he knew it. I sent him a last, cold look and then turned to smile at my pretty little companion. Malik would have to earn back my trust, but meanwhile, Star Salazar was mine. It was 4 a.m. by the time we arrived at the Inner Harbor hotel I owned. We rode the elevator up in silence. Star was staring at the elevator buttons as if her life depended on knowing which floor we were passing, and Malik knew better than to speak to me without permission. I kept a penthouse suite for my own use on the top floor of the hotel. Malik went first, checking the living room, dining room and each of the 3 bedrooms for threats. No one lived as long as I had without making a few enemies. He ended in the master bedroom suite, where he turned on low lights in first the sitting room to our left, and then the spacious black and gold bedroom. I leaned against a wall and watched Star take in the black lacquer furnishings, plush rugs and iron wall sconces. I might be a 21st century vampire, with my far-flung business holdings. I'd had to adapt or die. But I had a weakness for the rich trappings of my youth. Star's gaze landed on a painting by a 16th century Japanese artist. She inhaled sharply. Yes, I said. It's the original, by Kano Hideori. Do you know him? She nodded vigorously. Oh, yes. She moved closer to the painting to examine it. I just never thought I'd see one in person. None? I raised a brow, intrigued that a cocktail waitress recognized a Hideori. I purchased it in the late 1800s. She tore her gaze from the painting to look at me with rounded eyes. Seriously? How old are you? Then she flushed. Forget I asked. I moved closer. She tensed but held her ground. All you need to know, I tucked a shiny black strand of hair behind her ear, is that I'm very old. But it's been a long time since I've seen something as beautiful as you. Her tongue swiped over her red lips and my whole lower body tightened. I looked impatiently toward the master suite. What the hell was taking Malik, anyway? Boots thumped in the hallway and Malik appeared in the doorway of the suite. All clear. Monsieur, can I do anything else for you? I glanced at Star. Perhaps Mademoiselle would like something to eat? No thanks, she said with a nervous twitch of her head. I'm fine. I nodded and dismissed the big man. Don't disturb us until tomorrow afternoon. I added, unless absolutely necessary. He inclined his head, and then my new blood courtesan and I were alone. Star swiped her palms over her skirt. Anxiety came off her in salty waves. Anxiety, but also arousal. She slanted me a glance. I could almost hear her think. Tomorrow afternoon. I set a hands on her nape and drew her toward me. She resisted briefly and then allowed me to pull her closer. I remained silent, massaging her nape until her breath soughed out. I sat my hands on her lower back and indicated the master bedroom. After you, Ma Cheery. She squared her shoulders and entered the room like Marie Antoinette going to her execution. I stifled a sigh. I knew I hadn't imagined the arousal, but I could see I was going to have to calm the woman or she was going to fight this every step of the way. Well, I'd had hundreds of years to learn patience. I lit a couple of candles near the bed, then crossed to the large fruitwood cabinet and selected a well-aged Cabernet Sauvignon. I twisted the cork out with my own fingers and poured a healthy portion into each of 2 hand-blown glass goblets. Star had crossed the plush rug to the windows overlooking the inner harbour. I'd designed the hotel to a vampire's specifications. The windows were a special smart glass that by day was tinted a dark grey to protect me and my kind from the direct sun, but by night was clear to allow unimpeded views of the sky and the harbour. Taking the wine goblets, I joined Star at the windows. 7 stories below, the water was a dark mirror that reflected the nearby National Aquarium and its distinctive glass pyramids. To the east and south were the expensive condos which had sprouted in old waterfront neighborhoods that had once been so rough only crusty seamen and creatures of the night like myself could walk them unmolested. Star's silky hair fell forward over her shoulders to reveal a tempting slice of golden brown skin. I pressed my lips to the side of her neck as I offered her one of the goblets. Something to relax you. She turned and accepted the wine, but instead of drinking, stared into the dark red liquid, unmoving as a small, terrified bird. I felt another annoying twinge of guilt. I ignored it to set a finger under the goblet's foot and nudged it toward her mouth. Drink. She nodded jerkily and obeyed. The rare, expensive wine might as well have been a cheap house blend for all she tasted it. She took a second gulp, her soft throat working. I took a sip of my own wine. It was exquisite, dry and perfectly aged. I rolled it around on my tongue and then set the goblet on a nearby table. My pretty little victim sent me a wide-eyed glance and drained her goblet. Star. I took the glass from her and set it on the table. There is no need to be afraid. I'm not going to hurt you. I want only to give you pleasure. I'm not. She met my eyes and then shrugged. All right, fine. I am afraid. I gave a small smile, pleased that she told the truth, because I could read the fear on her face. Sent it. Right now it was battling with arousal and winning. It's normal. Cheery, we fear the unfamiliar, but I will be gentle with you, I promise. I turned her until she was facing the water again and set my mouth to her nape. My fangs lengthened, but when she stiffened, I merely wrapped my arms around her and ran my lips over the sensitive skin. Relax. The words slipped like syrup over my tongue, infused with a light compulsion. Stop that. She went stick straight, fighting the compulsion with everything she had. I frowned. I didn't have to cater to this fragile human. She'd signed a contract, and the beast in me wasn't going to let her walk out of this room without feeding. But I wanted her willing. A victim's blood was flavored by their emotions. I won't lie. Sometimes the beast in me relishes the flavor of fear. But with this woman, I wanted to taste her pleasure. I eased off the the compulsion and called on another ability instead, willing my body temperature to warm. Star's soft body relaxed in slow increments. "That's better," I said against her ear. "Relax. Allow yourself to enjoy. It's not so bad." "Yeah? How many people have sunk their teeth into your neck?" My lips quirked. "Only one. And that so long ago I could barely recall how it felt, but I did remember how once I'd gotten over the fear. It had been darkly thrilling." I switched gears. "I know you haven't been with many men. I'm not a virgin, if that's what you're asking." "None, but not many, I think. And whoever has had you before, none of them were me." I felt her smile at my arrogance, but she relaxed into my arms. "No," she agreed. "None of them were you. Say my name." I wanted to hear it in her American accent. "Remy." She hesitated, and then obediently repeated, "Remy." I shifted, so hard for her. My cock was trying to tear a hole in my pants. But first, there was something I needed to do. Bringing my hand up, I sank my teeth into my finger until a few drops of blood welled up. I brought it to her mouth. "Here, drink." She went rigid again and tried to turn her head. "No," she said between tight lips. My brow snapped down. I was used to people begging for even a single drop of my blood for its magical properties. A vampire's blood heals, Star. I stroked her hair. "It is for your own good. It will take away those bruises. Heal your lip. You're not trying to turn me into a vamp?" "No. Of course not. You had to die first, and then you have to drink much blood. Now drink it." She shook her head against my shoulder. "I'm tough. I hardly feel it, Star," I said sternly. "Okay, fine, if it will make you happy." Her small pink tongue darted out, lapping up the drop like a cat. Sensation punched down my spine. My balls tightened and the beast rose up, impatient to have her. I gritted my teeth. "Patience," I told both it and myself, and angled my head to look at Star's face. The marks were already melting away, and the cut on her lip had closed. Guilt assuaged, I slid a hand up her taut little torso. I unfastened the top button of her shirt, and then continued downward, one button at a time. With a third button, I could see her soft, full breasts in their plain white bra. Earlier that evening, I had ordered a complete wardrobe to be delivered to the suite in a couple of days, and I couldn't wait to see Star in the expensive underthings I'd bought. But there was something incredibly erotic about the white nylon against her warm-colored skin. I could just make out a dusky nipple pressing against the material. I slid a finger beneath the bra to tease the tightly filled point, and she sucked in a breath. "You like that?" I murmured. She nodded. I pinched her nipple, not hard, just enough to make her gasp and arch her back. The hell with patience. I'd been anticipating this for more than a week, ever since I'd first seen her on that stoop. My fangs literally ached to taste her sweet flesh. I touched the tender spot at the turn of her neck, and she went rigid. "A taste," I murmured. "I need." "All right." She held herself tensely in place. I brought one hand to her face, angling her head to the side. The other hand was still on her breast. My fingers spread to enjoy the whole beautiful weight of her. "Star," I breathed, and then the flavor of her was in my mouth, indescribable, and yet somehow familiar, as if I'd stumbled upon something I'd been searching for a long time. Chapter 7. Star. Star. Just my name, spoken against my neck, and nothing more. And yet it set tingles racing up and down my body. I angled my head further to the side, and he murmured, "Ooh, that's it, ma petite." I felt a slight prick. I sucked in a breath, and then relaxed. It didn't hurt. In fact, it felt good. Really, really good, I moaned and closed my eyes as Remy lapped at the small wound. He sucked harder. I gasped and gripped his thighs as pleasure seared through me. He muttered something in French against my skin and slid a hand down to stroke my mouth through the thin cotton skirt. At the same time, he undid the front clasp of my bra so that he could play with my nipples. My back arched. I dug my fingers into his thighs. This was nothing like I'd expected. My fear evaporated and all I wanted was more. Remy stroked his hands down my body, arousing me even further with slow, deliberate caresses. He was hard against my lower back. I instinctively wriggled against him, but he placed a hand on my hip to stop me. None. A single clipped syllable that made me still. Did I do something wrong? Fuck no. That was English. I'm very clear. He spun me around to face him. His eyes glowed in the dim light, the black almost completely obliterated by that silver blue. I gulped, very aware I was alone with a vampire. You read the contract? Yes, it states clearly that I'm the one in charge. I suppose so. I didn't want to admit that I'd barely read it, and besides, he'd made that clear enough in the alley. Although hadn't we agreed that part was negotiable? Just remember that, and we'll be fine. I moved a shoulder, too aroused to debate the point. Remy's gaze flicked to my bare breasts, reminding me that my shirt was wide open while he was still fully dressed. I pulled the placket closed over my chest. So what do you want me to do? Why don't we start by taking this off? He tugged my hands on the shirt and pulled it off me, then tossed it on a nearby chair. Now the rest, he said. He crossed his arms and waited, expressionless. Ah, I understood now. He wanted to keep this all business, to maintain his own cool even while he drove me wild with pleasure. Okay, Monsieur the Count, game on. I kicked off my heels and pulled off my skirt, then undid my bra and dropped it on the floor. Meanwhile, Remy shrugged off his suit jacket and draped it over the back of a chair without taking his gaze from me. My hands went to my boy-cut briefs, white with pink polka dots because they made me smile, and he stilled in the act of unbuttoning his shirt. I perched on the edge of the mattress and set my hands behind me so that my breasts angled upward. I might be prey, but that didn't mean I had to be a rabbit. This prey was going to use every weapon at her disposal. Remy's breath hissed in. I was average height, with nice curves, high, round breasts and hips to match. I didn't work out, but I walked or biked everywhere, so my legs were toned. For whatever reason, men found me sexy. Hell, guys had been coming on to me since I was 17 and finally escaped my father. But this was different. Remy was freaking worshipping me with his eyes. His gaze lingered on my breasts and my nipples hardened into tight points. I fought not to blush. Somehow, I had a feeling a vampire would enjoy that a little too much. Get into bed. His voice was low, intense. I pulled down the comforter and, still in those silly polka dot briefs, sat cross-legged on sheets that looked like cotton but were as soft as silk. Remy stripped off his shirt. It was my turn to stare. This was no pale, bloodless vampire. The man had the body of a god, broad shoulders and a hard abdomen that tapered to a flat belly. Dark hair dusted his chest and arrowed down to disappear beneath his waistband right above the hard ridge tenting his pants. He dragged off his shoes and pants, followed by boxer briefs. His cock jutted proudly at me from a nest of black hair. My heart gave a hard thump. This was really happening. I was a vampire's blood courtesan. For the next month, this man pretty much owned me. I looked back up at Remy's face. For an endless moment we stared at each other. Then he said, "Lie down." There may have been a light compulsion in his voice. I don't know. All I knew was that I wanted this as much as he did, and that scared me as much as anything. I eased myself back on the pillows. He moved so quick that I blinked, and he was on the bed next to me, gazing down with eyes that shone like the moon in winter. He crawled over me, one hand fisted in my hair, holding me still as he brought his mouth to my throat. With his other hand, he jerked my briefs down to my thighs. I lifted my hips, and he dragged them the rest of the way off without lifting his head from my neck. He inhaled deeply. "This," he gritted against my skin, "this is what I've wanted ever since I first scented you. I just can't decide where to taste you first. Here?" He touched my neck with his teeth. "Or here?" His fingers slid between my thighs to where I was hot and wet for him. I whimpered. It was too much, too fast. "Remy, What? Star, what do you want? Tell me." I moved my head from side to side against the mattress. "I don't know." His mouth went to my breast. He took my nipple between his teeth and nipped. Sensation streaked down my spine from somewhere far away. I heard myself moan. "Oh, God. Oh, God." Remy spoke over my broken muttering. "Beg me, Star." He slid his fingers into me and nipped my other nipple. I clenched my teeth. "Beg? I didn't think so. Contract or no, I wasn't giving any man that kind of power." He pulled his fingers out and stroked me, teasing my most sensitive tissue with a short touch. My eyes shut so I could savor it. It was amazing. And then it wasn't enough. I opened my eyes to find him looking down at me. "Beg me, Star." He drew a slow circle around my clitoris. "Say please, that's not in the contract." It was a shot in the dark, but he nodded. "You're right, it's not, but there's nothing about you getting pleasure, either." I narrowed my eyes. "You wouldn't." He just smiled. The candlelight flickered over his face. He looked impossibly beautiful, a dark, sexy demon. Okay, I definitely should have paid more attention to that damned contract. "Beg me." Hot, compelling words in the shadows. "Angelique," I gasped as he dragged his finger over a perfect spot. "Said it tastes better if the woman is willing." "Ah, but you are willing, ma petite. Don't you know I can scent your desire? It's intoxicating. Women are like wine to us, and you are a very dark, very dry red." His teeth touched my neck again. This time, I thought I knew what was coming. I closed my eyes and waited, but he went deeper, harder. Heat exploded through me, a fireball of pleasure that set every nerve in my body alight. I sucked in a breath and broke. "All right, damn you. Please, please touch me. I'll say anything you want, just." He chuckled darkly against my neck, but lower down, his fingers were working magic, sliding in and out of my needy passage, teasing my clit. I pushed my hips up and he murmured, "Slow down, cheery. No need to hurry. We have hours yet." I ignored him to rotate my hips against those talented fingers. He halted and gazed down at me sternly. "What did we agree?" I scowled. "You're in charge, damn it." His lips twitched. I knew he was laughing at me, but I didn't care. It had been a long time, and if he was going to sink his teeth into me, the least he could do was make me come first. He lifted his head and took my mouth with long, drugging kisses. His body settled between my thighs, and I could feel the hard length of him pressing against my damp sex. I twisted, trying to get closer to him, but he lifted off me. I whimpered, "Please don't tease me anymore." He brushed a kiss over my mouth. "SHH, he said. "Trust me, ma petite. Can you do that?" When I gave a jerky nod, he kissed me again and moved lower, kissing my belly, my damp curls. One long finger slid into me, stroking the delicate flesh while his tongue circled my clit. I speared my fingers in his hair and pulled him closer, forgetting he told me not to, but he allowed it, intent on what he was doing. He flicked his tongue over my clit and I gasped. Tension coiled in me. I writhed restlessly on the sheets. He nipped me gently and I jerked. My flesh was so hot, so swollen, that the tiny pain amped up the heat to an almost unbearable level. He gave a last long lick and then lifted his head. I groaned. Please, you want more? Yes. God, yes. He crawled up my body and nudged my thighs apart. Long, powerful hands cupped my face. I could smell the sex on his fingers, salty and arousing, open to me. Star. His fangs gleamed in the dim light. Let me in. My heart raced. I felt a last twinge of fear, even as I obediently placed my feet on the mattress and bent my knees. He slid inside, slow and easy, and Lord, it felt good. I sucked in a breath and clenched around him, and he muttered something approving in French. Still deep inside me, he brought his mouth to my neck, one hand fisted in my hair, drawing my head gently but firmly back so that my throat was exposed. I gripped his arms and squeezed my eyes shut. This was it. Somehow I knew it would make everything that had happened before pale in comparison. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Wary, yes, but not afraid, and so aroused. I was trembling with it. Remy, I whispered. Remy, easy. He smothered his hands down my quivering body. Easy. And then he sank his teeth into me. Hard. I gasped and arched my back. A sensation shot through me. He settled strongly, sending another punch of pleasure arrowing to my thighs. I made a sound somewhere between awe and amazement and wrapped my arms and legs around him. He gave a grunt of satisfaction, withdrew partly from me and then thrust inside me. I was so sensitized that I came a little right then, but the man was just getting started. He began to move, slow and firm and perfect, angling himself to hit just the right spot. And all the time, he was doing those magical things to my throat. With each suck, pleasure burst in me like mini fireworks. I moaned and dug my fingers into the heavy muscles of his back. His fingers tightened in my hair, holding me in place as he fed from me, the other hand clamping on my bottom as he thrust harder. He took one last hard suck and then withdrew his teeth from my neck, even though he continued to lick and kiss me there. That's enough for now, he muttered. I realized he was taking care not to take too much blood, and something in me melted, because he didn't have to take care of me. I was at his mercy. That much I remembered from the contract. As long as I was alive at the end of the month, he'd have fulfilled his part of the bargain. Remy brought a hand between our bodies to swirl his fingers over my clit. Come for me, he said against my throat. Yes, yes, I murmured. Then I squeezed tight around him and screamed out his name as the fireworks went up in a raw, wild display. Remy thrust a few more times, hard and fast and rough. Then he threw back his head, and with a groan, pushed so deep I could feel him to the base of my spine. He stilled, pulsing inside me. La Saint-Emia? A quiet murmur against my face. His weight pressed me into the mattress, heavy and warm. Then the pressure eased as he levered himself off me and turns onto his back. Thank you, my dear. I dragged in a breath, one arm over my head and legs still splayed open, and sent him an incredulous look. The man had given me the best climax of my life, and he was thanking me. But I simply murmured, no problem, because it was to my benefit to have Remy de la Lune grateful to me. At least that's what I told myself. and that's the reason I gave myself for rolling onto my side and stroking a hand down his taut abdomen. He shifted and slid his arm under my shoulders. I rested my head in the warm hollow of his shoulder and petted his chest, his stomach, enjoying how the muscles tense beneath my fingers. I thought you'd be ice cold, I murmured. I can control my body temperature. I like it. I snuggled closer. Something primitive in me took comfort from his heat. It had been a long time since anyone had held me. My hand crept lower, exploring. That's it, he said against my hair. Touch me. He was still half erect. I encircled his cock with my hand. He was hot and sticky from sex. I played my fingers up and down, watching as he started to lengthen. He remained silent, but I glanced up to find him watching me through glittering eyes, the blue less now, but still startling. How long does it take a vamp to recover? Not long, I squeezed. Suck me, star. A quiet order. I smiled to myself and brought my thumb to the flushed cap. Is that in the contract? I asked as I smothered my thumb over it. He growled. The hell with the contract. So it's not, not those words. You are mine for this month. You can't refuse me sex, or the right to drink from you, but you can refuse any acts you find unpleasant. Unpleasant? I mused. I don't think I'd find it unpleasant. Then suck me. I slid lower, pursed my lips and directed a stream of moist, heated air over his cock. Ooh, he breathed. Coms are. I licked my tongue up him once, then again. Slow, easy strokes. I was operating on instinct, because I had the feeling that if I was going to survive this month, and I mean emotionally, I needed to keep Remy off balance. He was too old, too dark, too dominant. I'd read between the lines of what Angelique had said about the other women. If I wasn't careful, I was going to be completely enslaved by him, and then when our 30 days were over, he'd kick me to the curb and my stupid heart would be broken. Not going to happen. I might be only a weak human, but I decided then and there to keep this just about the sex. Remy de la Lune might own my body, but my heart was mine. Chapter 8. Star. We didn't fall asleep until dawn was breaking over the harbour. Remy pulled shut the blackout curtains, and then wrapped me in his arms and murmured, "Rest." I was so wrung out, I went right off and slept until noon. When I woke up, we were in almost the same position. Remy curled around me, one big arm over my hip, keeping me in his control even in his sleep, because when I moved, he gripped my waist and muttered, "Where are you going?" I glanced back at him, but the room was so dark I could barely make out his face. To the John. He nodded and released me. "When you're through, I'll tell you what I have planned for today." "Sounds good." As I walked to the bathroom, I felt his gaze on my naked body. I had a feeling he could see perfectly well in the pitch-black room. I flashed him a smile over my shoulder and his teeth gleamed whitely back. Yep, he could. The bathroom was like something out of Better Homes and Gardens. Warm terracotta tiles with black counters and stainless steel fixtures, and a shower behind a clear glass wall. There was even a bowl of wrapped chocolates on the granite counter. I gulped down 2 large glasses of water and then helped myself to an orange-infused chocolate. "Oh my God," I groaned aloud as it melted on my tongue, lush and dark, as I helped myself to another, this one spiced with chili. I caught sight of myself in the mirror. My eyes were shining. My face was flushed and my usually straight black hair looked like a rat had nested in it, a hyperactive rat. In fact, I looked like I'd been making love all night to a vamp, which reminded me. I pulled back my hair and examined my neck. Even though Remy had sucked from the same place each time, It wasn't as bad as I expected, just 2 small red marks and a faint bruise. I glanced at my face again and shook my head. Then I grinned. Maybe being the vampire's courtesan had some compensations. The shower stall was larger than my entire bathroom at home. I walked through the opening at one side and down the length of the shower to where there were 5 shower heads arranged at various angles. It took me a few seconds to figure out how everything worked, but once I did, I set the temperature to hot and turned the handle. All 5 shower heads kicked on, sending water streaming over me from every possible direction. I practically purred as the heated water washed over my skin. A woman could get used to this. To tell the truth, I honestly didn't care if I was ever this rich. Beyond having enough to eat and buy art supplies, money didn't mean that much to me. But hey, everyone likes being pampered now and then. On shelves set into the tiles were a variety of organic soaps and shampoos. I washed and conditioned my hair, then chose a lavender-speckled soap. As I soaped up my breasts, Remy stepped into the shower and held out his hand. "I'll do that." I turned and dropped the soap into his palm. "Don't you people sleep during the day? The young ones do. They need more sleep than older vampires like me. I can take the sun in small amounts and get by on a few hours when I want to." His gaze flicked to my soapy breasts and his voice lowered. "And right now I want to, very much." He tucked my wet hair behind my ears and cupped my face. He seemed to have a perpetual night beard. I ran a hand down his jaw, enjoying the rough black stubble. "Do you shave?" "No, it's always like that. However your hair is when you're turned, that's how it remains." "I see. Enough about me. I'm more interested in you." He gave me a soft, open-mouthed kiss. You found the chocolate." He licked the seam of my lips. I closed my eyes and swayed towards him. He flicked his tongue inside. "Dark chocolate, my favorite." He caressed my shoulders. "I ordered you something to eat, but it won't be here for a few minutes. You have time to finish your shower." Firm hands turned me around so I was facing the terracotta wall. I set my hands on the tiles. My body was still being massaged by several hot streams. Remy moved my hair aside and, after rubbing some soap on a washcloth, began scrubbing my back. Oh, yeah. I rounded my back like a cat against the slight roughness of the cloth and gave a moan of pleasure. He was just getting started. Next, he slid his arms around my front and I arched in the other direction as his erection pressed into my lower back. He took his time washing my breasts, lifting each one in turn and soaping it thoroughly before rinsing it with his bare hand. Rivulets of heat undulated through me. I rested my cheek against the tiles and stifled a moan. The man could easily become an addiction. He nudged my legs apart with a single hair wreath and crouched behind me, washing my feet and legs with the same care he'd given my breasts. He dropped the washcloth and slid a hand between my thighs, caressing me. "What's this?" His mouth traced the outline of my tattoo, a shooting star. I'd designed it myself. A simple star outlined in black with thin trails curling out behind it, giving a sense of forward motion. Scattered among the trails were 9 tiny black stars, one for every year since I'd left the monster that was my father and started living again. He pulled back to study it. "Because of your name?" "Not really." "Then why?" His fingers stroked down my cleft again. "Who cares?" I spread my legs a bit further and arched my ass towards him. "I want to know." He nipped one of my cheeks. "Tell me, star. You chose it for a reason." My fingers flexed against the terracotta wall. "Freedom. It means freedom to me." There. That wasn't so hard, was it? A single long finger circled my needy center. No, I gritted, by the dark skies. He growled against my ass, his stubble scraping erotically over my skin. You were so responsive. I knew you'd be perfect for me. My breath sobbed out. Take me, Remy, now. But he didn't move, just kept caressing me. I hesitated, and then added, please. I felt his smile against my bottom. He rose to his feet with a muscular grace. How? I shook my head against the tiles. Strong hands pulled my hips back, tilting me at the right angle. Teeth touched my neck as he positioned himself between my legs. I asked, do a question. Star. Hard. I told the tiles. I need it hard. Then that's what you will have. He sank his fangs into my neck and thrust into me. When I came back to myself, Remy had turned off the shower and was drying me with a fluffy white towel. That finished, he wrapped me in a second towel and carried me back to the bedroom. I reclined on the pillows, spent. He turns on a single soft yellow light and stood looking down at me. You are feeling well? It was not too much for you? Too much? I smirked. You blew my freaking mind. Not that I'm complaining, but I'm starving. Right on cue, my stomach growled. I rubbed it and gave him a mock pout. Didn't you say you were going to feed me, or are you going to keep me in bed all day? He raised a brow at my sass. I had the feeling he didn't quite know how to deal with it. Of course I'm going to feed you. Your dinner should be here. He cocked his head to one side. Right about now, there was a discreet knock on the penthouse door. Remy pulled on a pair of black jeans. I'll be right back, he said, and headed down the hall. I looked around for a bathrobe. When I didn't see anything, I reached for his shirt instead. It was some kind of silky rayon blend that felt wonderful on my skin. I buttoned it up and ran a hand down the soft material of the sleeve. Remy returned pushing a trolley with 2 glasses, a bottle of sparkling water and a plate piled high with all kinds of food. A small bowl held strawberries dipped in dark chocolate, and there was a single sunflower in a green glass vase. He watched as I rolled up the shirt cuffs, then handed me a napkin. I laid it on my lap and reached for the plate, but he picked it up himself. It would give me pleasure to feed you. Suit yourself. I fluffed the pillows behind my back and sat cross-legged. Remy fed me an assortment of bite-sized morsels, each better than the one before it. Small slices of sweet cantaloupe, tiny crab cakes, chunks of cheese, crispy waffle fries, and a crusty peasant bread. I was starving, but even if I hadn't been, I would have gorged myself. It was that good, I said between bites. I could get used to this. His lips twitched, but his eyes were serious. Whatever you wish, you have only to ask. I quirked a brow. That's a dangerous thing to tell a woman. Ooh, but I think with you, it's not so dangerous. I'm not going to ask for diamonds, if that's what you mean, but I would love one of those chocolate-covered strawberries, of course. He held one to my lips. I took a bite and hummed with pleasure. Have some more, he urged. Not that I needed any coaxing. I finished all 5 strawberries and then sat back, replete. That's when I realized Remy hadn't tasted any of it. You don't eat? I didn't think so, but last night, he drank that wine. Nothing but wine. But it pleases me to see you eat. I can almost taste the food with you. He trailed a finger down my cheek. Your face is so expressive. He offered me a cube of Swiss cheese, and I reluctantly shook my head. No thanks. If I eat any more, I'm going to explode. But it was great. Good. Remy set the plate on a side table. Across the room, his cell phone rang. While he took the call, I fingered the sunflower. It was a bright, fiery yellow, with petals fanning around deep brown seeds in the center. Remy glanced at me and winked. I guessed that you were a sunflower kind of woman, he mouthed. My jaw dropped. Had he really just winked at me? It relaxed his whole face, made him look less like a beautiful statue. In fact, he looked almost human. Until now, I'd been distracted by his aura of power to really look at him. Now I realized he must have been turned as a young man. Probably not much more than 30. What would make a 30-year-old man choose to be a vampire? I recovered and mouthed back, I am, and Remy returned to his conversation, frowning and speaking in rapid-fire French. With him busy, I decided to explore my new home. The penthouse was huge, big enough for a good-sized family. The furnishings were exactly what I would have expected from Remy. Tasteful and quietly expensive. Beautiful, one-of-a-kind furniture, spiky flowers in tall vases, museum-quality paintings and sculptures. In addition to the master suite, there were 2 more bedrooms, one of which had been converted into a small gym with a treadmill and various other exercise machines. A hallway beyond the bedrooms opened into a huge living room. Dining room. I walked into the dining room and fingered the large flower arrangement on the sideboard, breathing in the sweet scent of roses and peonies. I crossed the room to the wall of windows that ran down one side of the dining room. While it was fun having wild rabbit sex and being hand-fed like some kind of concubine, the idea of being trapped in here for another 29 days was a little scary. Chill. Star. The man has to go out sometime. But damn, I didn't even know what the weather was like today. The windows were completely blocked by black blinds. I pressed a button and the blinds slowly raised. I smiled. The sun was out in full force. But even better, an enclosed balcony ran down 2 sides of the dining room. I slipped out the door and raised my face to the sunlight, drinking it in. It felt like it had been a week since I'd been outside. Not less than 24 hours. Below me, the harbour sparkled like a million diamonds had been scattered on its surface. Along the waterfront, a mix of tourists and office workers strolled, a bright, busy crowd that I itched to sketch. I propped my forearms on the railing and absorbed it. Life, movement, colour, until I couldn't stand it any longer. I'd seen a desk stocked with pads and pens in the living room. I darted back inside, helped myself to one of each and returned to the balcony, where I sat cross-legged on the sun-warmed tiles and began to draw. I had finished 3 sketches in rapid succession when I heard my name. Remy was beckoning me from the doorway of the dining room. The sun. It must be too bright for him. I jumped up and came back inside. Sorry, I said as I closed the blinds. I didn't think. No matter, he said with a shrug. As I said, I can take a small amount of sunlight, especially through tinted glass like this, but I prefer not to. He glanced at the pad in my hand. What are you doing, ma petite? Nothing. I set the pad on the sideboard. Was that call anything important business? He skirted me to pick up the pad and flip through it. My face heated. Those are just scribbles. None. You are an artist. I moved a shoulder. A wannabe. Maybe wannabe means want to be, yes? When I nodded, he said, so you think you are not an artist? I took the pad from him and held it to my chest. Well, maybe I am, but no one else thinks so. He took me by the shoulders. His hands caressed me even as his face stayed dead serious. Trust me, you are an artist. I am a collector, and in my time, I've known many artists. You could use instruction, perhaps, but you have the artist's eye. He pried the pad out of my fingers and flipped to the second sketch. See, here, where you used a few lines and shading to show the motion of the crowd. I can feel their energy. their enjoyment of the beautiful day. In color, it would be even better. I bit my lip. The critic in me was mortified that a sketch I tossed off in 10 minutes was being viewed by anyone, let alone a collector. But the artist, that small, needy heart of me that was starved for praise, glowed at his words. You will use the bonus money to work at your art? Yeah. I nodded, my eyes on the third sketch, a bicyclist weaving through the pedestrians. Good. It is yours then. What? My gaze jerked up. He had an odd expression on his face. I realized he was embarrassed, or at least, as much as a vampire could be. I direct Malik to deposit the bonus to your account today. I shook my head disbelievingly. But why? He moved his shoulder. A whim. My mind would. I'd have money, real money, enough to work as an artist full-time. For a year, maybe more. Holy crap. I mean, wow. My grin split my face. I don't know what to say. Thank you. Thank you very much. He set the pad down and drew me into his arms. You are most welcome. His hands slid under the shirt to squeeze my bare bottom. But I have an even better way for you to thank me. Chapter 9. Remy. I walked Star backward until her back was against the dining room wall. My hands went to the black crayon shirt. My black shirt. Something darkly possessive in me liked seeing her clothed in nothing but one of my own garments. I'd rarely offered a courtesan a bonus, and 50,000 was double what I'd ever paid before. And then I'd given her the bonus before she'd even spent 24 hours with me. But I trusted Star. The woman radiated honor. I was used to buying everything, even loyalty. And what I couldn't buy, I compelled with a combination of fear and magic. But Star was different. I wanted her to trust me in return, to give herself to me freely, no strings attached. There was something about her. I'd resisted it, tried to keep this strictly business, my cash for her body, but to hell with it. A smart businessman knew when to follow the rules, and when to toss out the book and act from the gut. Sometimes even a jaded, too long-lived man can surprise himself. But that didn't mean the woman wasn't going to earn every penny. I toyed with the top button of the black shirt. I like you in this. I may keep you in a shirt and nothing else for the next month. I undid the top 3 buttons and teased one of her pretty bronze nipples into arousal. But you look even better with nothing. I undid the rest of the buttons with vampire quick speed so that the shirt fell open as if by magic. Star moved her head from side to side against the wall, making low, sexy sounds of pleasure. My fangs lengthened. My beast wanted to bury them in her neck and suck for hours, to sink balls deep in her tight, wet passage, pin her to the wall, helpless and enthralled. But the man knew that would kill her. Still, the beast was roused. It took all of my considerable control to master it. I drew a slow breath, then another. When I thought it was safe, I fastened my mouth on one of her pretty furled nipples, licking and sucking. She groaned. I can't, please, none. I slid a hand between her thighs, testing her arousal. She was slick and wet. I smiled. My fangs were at full length now, preparing to feed, and her eyes widened. I scented her spike of fear, and the part of me that had once been human felt regret. I closed my mouth and wrested the beast back under control. It's all right. I speared my fingers in her hair and pulled her head gently to the side. Don't be afraid. I would never hurt you. I merely want to taste un petit gout. I'd switched to French without knowing it, something I only did under stress or when wild to feed. I fastened my gaze on her soft golden skin and repeated in English, a small taste, ma petite, that's all. Star's throat worked. I steeled myself for rejection. I was over the line. Even if she was a blood courtesan, I was feeding too frequently and I knew it. Even if she didn't, keeping her dazed and needy so she thought only of me. Tomorrow, I promised myself, tomorrow I would give her a break. Take only the minimum blood I needed for survival. But right now, I nuzzled her skin. Lord, I want you. Yes, she murmured. I scented another spike. But this time it was the hot spice of desire. Thanks the dark skies. Her head tilted sideways in surrender. Her hand came to my nape, pulling me closer. Please, Remy, go ahead. A growl rumbled in my chest. I cursed the beast that made me feed even as I undid my pants and prepared to take her against the wall. It will be good for you, I promise. No. She slanted me a look from smoky green eyes. Her lips were still swollen with my kisses from the night before. Every part of her smelled of me, and still it wasn't enough. Then I forgot everything but the woman and my need. Lifting her by the hips, I thrust home at the same time as I sank my fangs into the sweetness that was her throat, and fed. Chapter 10. We didn't leave the room for 3 days. Remy mentioned he was in Baltimore for business, but he seemed to have as much time as necessary to take me every way possible. From time to time, I surfaced and wondered about the outside world, but mostly I was lost in a sensual haze, learning his body and being explored by him in turn. At dusk on the 3rd day, I woke to hear him in the shower. I pulled on a silky purple bathrobe that had appeared from somewhere and walked to the windows. Far below, people strolled along the harbour front. I set my hand on the thick glass and stared down at them. That almost claustrophobic feeling from the first day returned. Did the man never go outside? Remy entered the room. When I didn't turn around, he came up behind me and caressed my upper arms. You'd like a walk, yes? You look like you're going to jump out the window. It no longer surprised me how he seemed to read my mind. I shrugged. I'm not used to spending all my time in bed. No, that's one of the things I like about you. His lips brushed my neck. Your energy, but you make a beautiful courtesan. I stiffened. I'd thought we'd gone past that stupid contract, that I was his lover, not his freaking courtesan. But maybe it was good that he'd reminded me. This is just sex. No hearts involved. Go take a shower. He smacked my bottom. And when you come back, we will go for a walk. But first, I have a surprise for you. A surprise? I tried to infuse my voice with enthusiasm. Does it involve clothes? Because otherwise I was going to have to wear the shirt and skirt I'd arrived in, and as far as I was concerned, I'd like to burn the whole outfit. No guessing. Go take your shower. I nodded and headed for the bathroom, but when I was alone in the shower, I leaned against the wall and dragged in a breath. It's just sex. For a long minute, I let the hot water pour over me. Then I straightened and finished washing before wrapping myself in one of the fluffy white towels. As I left the bathroom, Remy entered the hall, dressed in black jeans and a silver shirt that set off his eyes. He looked rich, sexy and impossibly beautiful. Then he grinned and my chest clenched. Lord, I was in deep shit. Ready for your surprise? I summoned up a smile. I'd die if he guessed I was halfway in love with him. I am, and I was kind of excited. Malik and a couple of flunkies had arrived earlier in the day with a pile of mysterious packages. Et voilà. Remy opened the closet door with a flourish. I blinked. I'd expected him to be generous, but the closet was stuffed with more clothes than I could wear in a year. Soft sweaters, all kinds of shirts, skinny jeans, and assorted other pants, skirts and dresses, all in my favorite colors, vivid golds and greens and reds and pinks, along with some black for contrast. How did you know my size? I fingered a sleeveless black lace dress. Somehow I knew it would fit like it had been sewn just for me. "I have a knife for a woman's body," he said with typical Remy arrogance. "You are happy?" "Oh, yes, it's too much, but they're beautiful." He smiled and handed me a shopping bag labeled with the name of a sexy lingerie store. "You'll need this, too." Inside were a dozen sets of bra and panties along with several tiny nightgowns. Wow! I scooped up a handful of the gauzy little nothings and let them trail through my fingers. "I feel like effing Cinderella." Remy gave a bark of laughter and, taking the shopping bag from me, set it on the floor and then dragged me close to kiss my still open lips. "Such a mouth you have, but I promised I would supply your needs, and I'm a man of my word." He released me and took a copper satin bra and panty set from the bag. With this, I rubbed the silky material between my fingertips. I suppose I should have felt as if I were being bought, and I did, a little, but the man clearly had money to spare. I glanced at Remy. His gaze flickered a hot blue. My inner thighs clenched. I'd learned what that look meant. I might be Cinderella, but he was no Prince Charming. No, he was more like the wolf. I turned toward the bathroom, but he shook his head. "None here, where I can see." He propped himself against a wall and crossed his arms, watching as I removed the towel and tossed it into the bathroom. The only light in the hall came from the bedroom, a few feet away, so that except for those hot eyes, he seemed to disappear into the shadows. I unclasped the bra, conscious of his gaze. My face heated, but so did my lower belly. I decided to put the panties on first. I hung the bra over the nearest doorknob and stepped into them, feeling awkward and self-conscious, but excited, too. I glanced at Remy. He'd banked the heat so that his expression was cool, but his cock was straining at his jeans, and suddenly I didn't feel awkward at all. Instead, I felt strong, powerful, sexy. "That's it," he husked. "Put them on for me." I eased the panties the rest of the way on and took my time adjusting them. Next, I held the bra to my breasts and slanted Remy a look up from under my lashes. I could use some help. I turned around and presented him my back. He was across the hallway before I was finished speaking. One long-fingered hand splayed over my stomach, while with the other he moved my hair aside to expose my nape. "Such a bad girl, you think?" His erection poked my bottom. I wriggled against him. "But you like bad girls, don't you?" He muttered something in French, jerked down my panties, and sank his teeth into the side of my neck just below my ear. It was another 2 hours before we made it outside. When we finally emerged from the hotel, a light rain was falling all around us. People scurried for shelter, but I just shoved my hands into the pockets of my new leather jacket and took a deep breath of the damp air. It smelled of asphalt and exhaust from the constant stream of cars moving down Pratt Street, but it wasn't the canned air of the hotel, and that was good enough for me. Remy paused under the awning. Malik, who'd been waiting in the lobby, stepped forward with an umbrella. Remy held it over the two of us as we strolled along the waterfront, Malik trailing a few yards behind. We'd only been in the hotel a few days, but before that I'd been working nights for a week and sleeping half the day. Now we passed a pear tree in full bloom, and I blinked at the delicate white blossoms when had spring arrived. "You need fresh air," Remy murmured. "From now on, we will go outside each evening." His tone was matter-of-fact, the vamp taking care of his food supply. But when I glanced up at him, I surprised an expression that was oddly tender. He looked past me, his face settling into its usual cool lines. "I believe this restaurant has an acceptable wine list for America. That is, Would you like to go inside? Perhaps to have some dinner? That would be nice. I touched my stomach. I could eat a horse. His lips quirked. We'll see what we can arrange. He turned his head to speak to Malik. We will be dining here. Obtain us a private table, and then you may have dinner yourself. Oui, monsieur. Malik strode past us into the restaurant. Remy was facing me, so he didn't see the look Malik sent me as he went by. But I did, and what I saw made me shiver, because his eyes were narrow with dislike. The host led us to a small, private table in the corner. I opened the menu and studied it. Not that it did me any good. I hadn't a clue what sea urchin tasted like. Ditufak Whalen cauliflower mousseline, and there weren't even any prices. Remy glanced at me. Why don't you try the salad with beets and goat cheese? He suggested. And if you like fish, the chef prepares an excellent sea bass. Sounds good. I shut the menu, relieved. The waiter arrived, and Remy gave him my order, adding, and a glass of Sauvignon Blanc to go with the sea bass. For himself, he ordered a dry red that I'd never heard of. Remy had taken the seat to my right, so close I could feel his thigh against mine. The wine arrived, and he raised his glass to my beautiful little star. I touched my glass to his. Thank you. He took a sip of his wine, his black eyes on mine. My mind flashed to that first night in the hotel, and the two of us drinking the wine. My body heated. I squirmed, and the chair. Remy gave a small smile and set his glass on the table. He set his arm on the back of my chair and played with my hair. Tell me about your family. There is no one but your father. He's not dead, is he? I stared down at the table. No, I said between tight lips, but he's dead to me. He stroked my nape. I'm sorry, ma petite. For what? That I had a bastard of a father? That's not your fault, is it? No, but I'm sorry anyway, especially that there was no one to help you. I swallowed noisily. Mom tried, but he was too strong for her, and I don't just mean physically. He was just too effing strong, and then she died. There was no one else, a relative, none close by. My dad didn't get along with his family, and most of them are either in the Philippines or in California. My aunt tried to help, Mom's sister, but it's hard to get custody from a birth parent. And then we moved from New York to Washington, D.C., and no one knew where we were. When I left, I didn't tell my aunt because I didn't want to make her lie to my dad, or the police, if my dad even called them. And your father, where is he now? I don't know. A few years ago, I was in D.C. and I went by our old apartment, but he was gone. I had nightmares for weeks, thinking he was in Baltimore looking for me. I shook my head. Stupid, right? I can find him for you. Remy's fingers continued their slow slide over my nape. Make sure he never hurts you again. I gripped the stem of my glass. I was tempted, so damn tempted. Even now, 7 years later, when I saw someone who looked like my dad, or heard a man with a Filipino accent, my heart kicked into overdrive. But I wasn't that kind of person, except I worry sometimes that he's found someone else to beat on. Remy nuzzled my hair. I'll put a man on it. You'll feel safer if you know where he is. Tommy Salazar, yes? Somehow I wasn't surprised he knew my father's name. All right, yes, I would like to know. And I would feel safer, but don't do anything without telling me, all right? Very well, just like that. I leaned back so I could see his face. You swear you won't do anything? He moved his shoulder. This is your decision, but understand that all I'm promising is that I won't do anything without your knowledge. I may take action whether you want me to or not. I shook my head in reluctant admiration. You're a tricky son of a bitch, aren't you? You don't live as long as I have without learning a few things. I traced the line of his jaw. I can see I'll have to watch myself around you. He just smiled. His hand tightened on my nape, drawing me to him until I was perched on my chair, leaning into him, our mouths so close I could feel his lips a hair's breadth away. His tongue slit over the seam of my mouth. "Open to me," he murmured. My mouth opened and his tongue swept inside. He tasted of red wine and something uniquely him. Sparkles fizzed through me. I fisted a hand in his shirt and sucked on his tongue. He groaned against my lips. "Ma petite, excuse me, sir, madam." The waiter had arrived with my salad. Remy released me and waited until the waiter had gone again. "You're strong." He tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. "I admire that about you." I drew a deep breath, my head still swimming from that kiss. "How do you know? We've only known each other 3 days." "No, I see it in everything you do. You didn't let that bastard steal your smiles. You got out, and you're going to make something of yourself. Trust me, I know." "Thanks," I muttered and picked up my fork, but inside I was smiling. Remy was so strong. To hear him say that I was, too, was the best compliment he could have given me that night. Remy was sweet, almost gentle, as if trying to make up for all the bad things in my life. I could have told him he didn't have to. Like he'd said, I'd got out, I'd survived, and I was proud that I'd done it on my own. If the price for that was the occasional nightmare, well, I'd lived through much worse, but I enjoyed it all the same. As soon as he got back to the hotel, he drew me to the bedroom and kissed me, over and over until my knees were weak and my brain hazy with pleasure. Then he undressed me and laid me down on the bed before removing his own clothes and crawling on top of me. I reached for him and he pressed my hands to the mattress on either side of my head. "Tonight, I want you to enjoy, all right?" His dark hair curled over his ears and down the side of his neck. His eyes were very black, his expression earnest. He looked young, almost human. I nodded solemnly. "Do you like this, Star?" He moved his hands over me, his gaze intent, as if he wanted to learn my deepest secrets. "And this?" "Yes, yes." My hips arched up to his, just like that. His teeth flashed white in the shadows. His fangs were only slightly elongated. "Ah." He bent forward to press his mouth to mine. "I'll tell you a secret," he said against my lips. "I can sense you, how aroused you are, and it makes me wild. There's a bond between us, a blood bond, from me feeding on you, and because you drank from me. Even that small amount is enough to create the bond if the human is, how do you say it, ? In sympathy with a vampire." I nodded, unsurprised. I wondered. Because I feel it too. Right from that first day we met. I wondered if you did. It's because we're tuned, compatible. He gave me a long, hot kiss and then sat back up. As he drew a finger over my collarbone, something occurred to me. I tensed and pushed myself partway up on my forearms. "You can't use this blood bond to control me, can you?" "None." I narrowed my eyes. "You're sure?" "Calm yourself, love." He pressed me back down on the bed. "Sometimes I feel your emotions, and I can tell where you are at all times. But no, I cannot control you except through compulsion. And frankly, I find you difficult to compel. You have a very strong will." I smiled at that, but I had another question. "When I leave, will it still be there, this bond?" "It will." Remy petted my breasts and I sucked in a breath. "But I have many of these bonds with humans. Unless I'm concentrating on you, it's barely noticeable, and you'll forget me after a while." A shadow crossed his face. It's how humans are. I tilted my head. That bothers you? Maybe that was why he tried to keep things cold, businesslike. He couldn't afford to get close to a human, because if he fell in love, or even just made a friend, their time together would be the blink of an eye compared to his lifetime. He shrugged. That is the price I pay, but I have no complaints. I chose this life. Why? His gaze turned inward. Who knows? I was young, like you. I'd lost all my family, although with them it was a war. The soldiers came and they killed everyone. Only I survived, because I was in another town that day. I left, became a traveler, and one day a vampire saw me. A count. He wanted me for my body at first, but then, as time passed, he came to depend on me, and eventually he made me his heir. I became a lord of our clan after he was staked by one of our own people. He looked at me. But would I do it again? Most days. I believe I would. Ooh, at some days he shook his head. I recall all that I've lost and wonder if it was worth it. My heart squeezed. I cupped his face. I'll never forget you, Remy. Never. I swear. None. But he allowed me to draw him down. We kissed, and then his body was on mine, pressing me to the mattress. We stopped speaking then, but the conversation continued. Here, touch me here. Yes, like that. Perfect. Then he muttered, I can't help myself. I have to drink from you, please. I like it. He muttered something that sounded like foolish human, then pinned me to the mattress and sank his fangs into my neck. Pleasure whipped through me. My breath sobbed out. Remy thrust into me, hard and fast, his body angled so that with each stroke, he took me higher. I lifted my hips to him and whimpered incoherently. So good. Because it was, each time better than the last. Take it, star. Take me. Remy gave a hard suck that I felt from my head to my toes, matched by an equally hard thrust of his cock. I arched my back and cried out his name as I came in the most powerful orgasm I'd ever had. My heart. Remy slowed, allowing me to wring every last drop of sensation until I relaxed. He lifted his head from my throat and kissed me, keeping up that slow rhythm until my body tensed again. My head moved from side to side. It's too much. No, it isn't. He flipped me on my stomach and brought his hand between us, teasing me with long, sure fingers. How can you know? My breath hitched. Oh, God. That's it. Don't stop. Please don't stop. I lifted my bottom to him. No, he said. I won't. Now come for me again, star. His fingers played with me. I shook my head against the mattress, but he kept it up. His fingers gentle but relentless, until I was up on my hands and knees, and begging him to take me harder. He muttered something harsh, grabbed my hips and slammed into me until I came a second time in a long, drawn-out climax that seemed to go on forever. Remy right behind me. He stilled and hung limply over me a minute, then pressed a kiss to my spine. Thank you, he murmured before rolling onto his back and drawing me into his arms. Sure, anytime. I let out a contented sigh and pressed a kiss to the side of his jaw. Sleep. He stroked my hair. Sleep. I nodded and closed my eyes. As I fell asleep, it occurred to me that Remy was stronger than my father in every way, emotionally, physically, mentally. But unlike with my father, I wasn't the least bit afraid of Remy. Chapter 11. Remy. The guilt had returned tenfold, but I was experiencing another, even more unfamiliar sensation. The urge to ease someone else's pain. The first step was to find Tommy Salazar. Before I fell asleep that morning, I set my best men to hunting Salazar down. Their orders were to bring him to me the moment they found him. Alive? The man in charge asked. I hesitated, then reluctantly said, but do whatever is necessary to get his cooperation. Of course, sir. I ended the call. Tommy Salazar would come willingly, or they would break his bones, one by one, until he agreed. It didn't matter to me, because by the time I was through with him, the bastard would wish he'd never been born. I would keep my promise to Star, but Salazar was going to pay for every mark he'd ever made on his daughter. In the meantime, I took a long look at myself and wondered if I was much better. After all, I'd trapped Star into being my courtesan. Yes, I treated her like a princess, but I knew damn well she'd never have signed the contract if she hadn't thought she had no choice. A better man would let her go, but I'd never pretended to be a good man. The hell of it was, it wasn't just lust. I liked the woman, her sass, her wry wit, the way she wasn't afraid of me like most humans. I'd never smiled so much as I had these past few days. I toyed with the idea of helping her career. From what I'd seen, she was a talented artist, and I'd mentored other artists in the past. Perhaps when our 30 days were up, I'd set her up with her own studio. But why let her go at all? For once, I wasn't growing bored with a courtesan almost as soon as I had her. Perhaps I should extend the 30 days to 60, or even more. But I didn't ask. Not yet, because I wasn't sure she would agree. Most of my courtesans had begged to stay, both for the money and the sex. With Star, though, I couldn't be sure. You didn't cage a woman like her, even if the cage was made of gold and lined with the softest velvet. Meanwhile, Star was mine, and I vowed to do everything in my power to keep her happy. We took a long walk each evening, and I forced myself to feed less. No more than twice per day. I ordered regular meals for her and made sure she ate them. When I discovered she'd never had a massage, I arranged for a couple's massage in our apartment, although that ended with me ordering the therapist out of the room and bending Star over the table to take her. A week passed. The two of us fell into a rhythm of staying up most of the night and sleeping most of the day. Although she usually fell asleep before me and then woke a few hours before I did, I used my free time at night to tend to my business empire, and Malik reported that Star used her time during the day to sketch and read and work out in my private gym. At the beginning of the second week, Charles Ricker, a local vampire, sent me an invitation to the opening of a show at his art gallery. How would you like to go to a show at the Ricker Gallery on Thursday? I handed Star the postcard with the invitation. It's called Illumination. The card contained a personal message from Charles saying he'd be honored if I attended. Star's eyes rounded as she read it. You know Charles Ricker? I nodded. I've bought a number of pieces from him over the years. If you like, I'll introduce you. Oh, I'd like. But what am I going to wear? She rushed into the hall to rifle through the clothes I'd bought her. I quirked a brow and followed her. Up until now, Star had spent most of her time in jeans, unless I specifically requested she dress for dinner. But apparently meeting the owner of the Ricker Gallery rated higher on the apparel scale. She frowned at me over her shoulder. You could help, you know. I hate to admit it, but you have better taste than me. I would be delighted. I considered the choices, then took out a sleeveless sheath of black lace over a green slip. It was one of my favorites, but she had yet to wear it. She held it up to her body and gave a decisive nod. Perfect, thanks. Later that day, as she closeted herself with a stylist I'd arranged to do her hair and makeup, I waited impatiently to see what emerged. How odd. I was actually feeling anticipation. I examined the feeling in the 700+ years since I'd been turned. I'd pretty much seen it all, but this little human awakened long dormant feelings in me. The two women emerged from the bathroom. The stylist murmured goodbye and saw herself out. I barely noticed. My gaze on Star Maze to a spell. I breathed. She was almost unrecognizable as the waif I'd first seen on a Baltimore stoop. Her black hair had been cut and styled into a sleek wave that curved under her chin, hiding the mark where I fed from her, and the stylist had done something that made her dark green eyes shadowy, mysterious. And I'd been right about the black lace sheath. It fitted her like a second skin, showing off every sexy curve. My fangs lengthened. Star smothered her palms over the skirt. You like it? It's not too much. Not at all, my dear. The dress is perfect. She glanced at my face. My fangs were fully elongated, my mouth slightly open to accommodate them, and my cock was already half hard. Her lips curved in a small, secret smile. Merci, Monsieur de la Lune. Come here. I held out my hand. She moved forward and I drew her into my arms. I could take you right here, I said, running my hands down her back to her luscious and squeezing. But I won't. It would be a pity to tamper with such beauty. I bent her over my arm and gave her a long, senseless kiss, then reluctantly set her from me. She blinked up at me, her expression dazed. Remy, later, Mommy. I gave her a last soft kiss and then reached into my pocket. I believe I have something to go with the dress. I opened my hand to show the gold collar that I'd had flown in from Paris. 5 hammered medallions linked by a delicate chain. On the center medallion, I'd had the jeweler inscribe a shooting star. She sucked in a breath. Oh my God, I love it. She touched the shooting star wonderingly. You must have had it made just for me, something to remember me by. I'd ordered the necklace the morning after we'd gone to the restaurant, because Star had promised never to forget me, and for once, I wanted that to be true. She fingered the necklace. Oh, I'll remember you, Remy, she said. My heart cracked a bit at that. Or whatever passed for a heart in a vampire as old and cold as me. To cover my confusion, I made a circling motion with my finger. Turn around and I'll put it on you. I arranged the collar around her throat and closed the clasp there, snaking an arm around her waist. I pressed a kiss to her neck. My still prominent fangs broke the skin. Twin droplets of blood welled and I muttered an apology. Star merely raised an arm and pulled me closer. It's too much, she said. I shouldn't keep it. Why the hell not? I growled. I can afford it. I lapped the sweet salty droplets from her neck. The scent of her went straight to my cock. I pressed myself against her soft round ass, tempted to say the hell with it and jerk up her skirt, take her right there against the wall. Her grasp on my head tightened. I shouldn't, she repeated, but try and take it back and I'll break your effing fingers. I gave a bark of laughter and then released her. I wanted her badly, but not like this. I wanted to take my time with her, and besides, it would be a shame to miss her when she looked so beautiful. I gave her a courtly bow. After you, Ma Cheery. The Ricker Art Gallery occupied a prime location just north of the inner harbour in Mount Vernon. I recalled when Mount Vernon had been home to wealthy industrialists who'd built the large, beautiful stone mansions that studded the neighbourhood. What, I wondered, would those brash, self-made men have thought of their expensive homes being turned into restaurants, art galleries and shops? Some of them would have been horrified, but I suspected at least a few of them would have approved. They were businessmen, after all. By the time we arrived at the gallery, people were spilling out the doors. I handed Star out of the limo and ushered her to the door. The crowd automatically parted for us. Even when humans don't realize they're in the presence of a vampire, they tend to give my kind a wide berth, recognizing us for the predators we are. Inside was a mix of collectors, local artists and others I recognized from the local art scene. I spotted the critics for the Baltimore Sun and the Washington Post, deep in conversation in front of a work made up of a grid of tiny LED lights. My pupils narrowed to pinpoints. All the works were made of lights of some kind, the cumulative effect so bright it hurt my eyes. As I put on a pair of dark sunglasses, I noticed 3 vampires from Charles's Govern eyeing me from across the room. I nodded at them but stayed with Star. My rank was far above theirs. They wouldn't approach me unless I gave them leave, and I was damned if I was going to introduce them to Star. Meanwhile, my companion looked around with big eyes. I set a proprietary hands on her lower back and smiled down at her. She was so adorable sometimes. Would you like a glass of wine? Or champagne, perhaps? Champagne, please. I took 2 glasses from a nearby waiter and handed one to Star. As we strolled round the gallery, I kept her close. The vampires weren't the only men in the room appreciating how she filled out the lacy little dress. My fangs lengthened again, but this time in warning. I forced them to recede. Star didn't even notice. She was too busy eyeing the art. I wonder how he did that, she muttered, and then on the next piece. What do you think she means here? Her enthusiasm sparked mine. We stopped in front of a neon tube twisted in an endless blue loop and debated whether it represented infinity or light itself, or both. We agreed on that piece, but on the next one, we took opposite sides. She threw up her hands and told me I was out of my mind. I grinned down at her. Say that again, I murmured next to her ear, and I'll show you how crazy I can be. A waitress approached and I traded Star's empty champagne glass for a full one. She took a sip and closed her eyes in pleasure. Wow, that's good. I don't think I've ever had champagne before. Not real champagne. Anyway, my lord. It was Charles Ricker. I'm so glad you stopped by, Ricker. I inclined my head. The pleasure is mine. Ricker was a lean blonde with short hair and hungry silver eyes. His gaze raked over Star and settled on her neck. And who's your little friend? My lip curled. Young vampires. Ricker had been turned less than 20 years ago. Could be so obvious it was embarrassing. Ricker glanced at me and gulped at whatever he saw in my face. Good. He should have known better than to slaver over my woman. Meanwhile, Star inched closer to me. I put an arm around her shoulders, disinclined to share her. But I'd promised. This is Star, I told him. Star Salazar. Remember her name. She's a talented artist. You'll be hearing more from her. A blush touched Star's cheeks. I'm not so sure about that. Ricker was staring at the pretty color on her cheeks. It was like waving a red flag before a bull. My fangs pricked my lips again, and all I wanted was to drag my little courtesan somewhere private and taste the champagne bubbling in her veins. Come to think of it, I wasn't all that much better than Ricker. I growled at the young vampire, and he dragged his gaze back to me. What do you think of the show? It's most interesting, I replied. We're both enjoying it. It's freaking awesome, Star interjected. This is the next wave. I wouldn't be surprised if it sells out tonight. Naturally, Rick loved hearing that, and the two of them fell into a discussion of the nearest work, which ended with him pressing a third glass of champagne on her and then inviting her to return another day for a private viewing. Anytime, he added with a heated look at her throat. Star glanced at me. I sensed her uneasiness at agreeing to a private anything with Charles. Smart woman. Thank you, Charles. I pulled her a little closer. We'd be happy to return for a private viewing. The other vampire's face fell, but he was too much of a businessman to upset a major collector. Of course, my lord. Have Malik contact my assistant and set up an appointment. I will. With that, I steered Star out of the gallery and to the limo, where my driver and Malik were waiting to take us back to the hotel. I'd been patient long enough. I pushed the button that lowered the privacy screen between us and the front seat, and pulled Star onto my lap. Damn Charles Ricker, and damn that crowd. I buried my face in her neck as I dragged up her skirt. I couldn't wait to have you alone. Yeah? Her head fell back against my shoulder. Thank you for taking me, though. It was freaking awesome. She giggled. I already said that, didn't I? Ooh, but now I have need of you. I nudged the necklace aside and sucked the tender spot above her collarbone as I slid my fingers into her panties. Here I stroked her hot, moist slit, and here I nipped her collarbone. Right here in the limo. Her tone was interested. Malik knows better than to disturb us. I'll tell you a secret. She slid her fingers into my hair and pulled me closer to whisper in my ear. That champagne, it went right to my head. Then you won't mind if I have a taste. She waved an airy hand. Be my guest. That was all the invitation I needed. The call from Paris came the following afternoon. I had just woken up when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. It was from one of my top people in France. My third in command. He informed me that all hell had broken out in Paris, with vampires attacking other vampires. Worse, my second, a vampire named Germain, was part of it. I'd have to go home before I lost half my clan. I bit out a curse that made the man on the other end stutter an apology. I'm sorry, Monsieur le Comte, but there was nothing I could do. Germain, he's too strong. Yes, I said impatiently. You did the right thing in calling me. I'll be there by tomorrow morning. My next call was to Malik. Get in touch with Jean-Michel. He was the pilot of my private jet. Tell him we'll be leaving for Paris in 3 hours. He nodded, and I shut the door and went to tell Star. I found her in the dining room staring out at the harbour. It was late afternoon, and golden sunlight danced over the dark green water. She had a palm pressed to the window as if trying to absorb the life and light in the scene below. I was reminded of that shooting star tattoo on her hip. I scowled. Did she have to act like she was in a goddamn prison? I'd done everything I could to make her happy, but this wasn't her world. She was young, full of energy, a sunflower kind of woman. God, I was a bastard for forcing this on her. Lord help me if she ever found out the truth. Guilt made my tone abrupt. I have to leave for Paris in a few hours. Paris, France? She turned around. When I nodded, she grinned. Awesome. I've always wanted to go. You're not coming. Her face fell. You're leaving me here? I wasn't used to explaining myself to anyone, but I found myself saying, it's for 2 or 3 days only. My clan. There is a situation in Paris. Business. You'd only be bored in Paris? Are you kidding? How could I be bored? I blew out a breath. I'm sorry, but I must say no. Okay. She shrugged, and I sensed her hurt, but I wasn't going to budge on this. It was for her own safety. The last thing I wanted to do was take a soft, innocent human like her into a nest of warring vampires. You can stay at the hotel, order anything you like, do some shopping, perhaps. How does that sound? She moved a shoulder, then she brightened. No, I'll go back to the apartment. I have some things I need to do. My stomach iced. Absolutely not. There was no way in hell I was letting her out of my protection. She was a marked woman, whether she knew it or not. She folded her arms over her chest. Why not? Your apartment. It's not safe. Hey, I know it's not in a pricey neighborhood like this, but it's not like I'm not used to it, I growled. Damn it, woman, this is not up for argument. You will stay here in the hotel. She glared at me. And if I leave? I stepped closer. I wouldn't, if I were you. Our gazes locked, but I wasn't going to back down. Not on this. You will stay in the hotel, I said, my voice dark with compulsion, until I return. She swallowed, and I relented enough to say, damn it, Star. This is for your own safety. Allow me to take care of you, please. Her chest heaved. Why would you want to? I'm just a paid body for you to fuck and feed from. Perhaps, I growled back. But for this month, you're my body, my woman, and you will let me protect you. I increased the force of the compulsion. Stop it. She smacked my chest. You bastard. Don't you dare try to force me. Then don't be foolish. I am a count, ruler of a vast clan of vampires. My enemies would love to feed on my woman, but they can't touch you as long as you are with me. The hotel is safe too. I own it, and the employees are all mine. But as soon as you go back to your own apartment, you become vulnerable. You might as well paste a target on that pretty neck of yours. She scowled at me another few seconds and then blew out a breath. Fine, whatever you say, Count. But what am I going to do while you're gone? Lay around in bed and eat chocolates. I want to paint. I need to paint. That is the problem. You want to paint? I waved a hand. Then you will paint. We will make you a studio. What do you mean? Tell Malik what you need. By tomorrow morning, it will be here, and I mean anything. Make the studio of your dreams. The money is nothing. Maybe for you, she muttered. I only want for you to be happy. She scrutinized me. But why? I signed a contract. You're paying me a ridiculous amount of money. We both know that if you wanted to, you could lock me in here while you're gone. No one would stop you. I shrugged. I wasn't sure myself why I got so much pleasure from indulging this woman. Call it a whim. You please me, Star, and I like to encourage talent such as yours. It is a hobby of mine. I curved my hand around her nape. Her eyelids lowered and she arched into my touch, making soft sounds of arousal that were like hot licks over my balls. Her eyes opened, the green dark with wanting. She moistened her lips. When do you have to leave? I could stay another hour, if you ask nicely. Her tongue swiped over her full red mouth. Her gaze darted to where my erection dented my boxers. What do you mean? Ask nicely. For answer, I set my hands on her shoulders, urging her down. Understanding dawned and she went to her knees before me. I watched as she ran a finger up my length, teasing me through the black silk. That's it, I said in a guttural voice. Take me in your mouth, little one. But of course, she didn't obey. Not my Star. Instead she ran her lips over my erection, wetting the silk with her tongue. I fisted my hands at my sides so I wouldn't grab her and force her to suck me. I wanted her to do it willingly. She set her lips against the head of my cock and made a humming sound that moved through the cloth as if it were tissue. I swore in French as the vibration went straight to my balls. You like that, huh? She murmured against me, sending another hum of sensation through me. Ooh, but I would like even more for you to do it against my bare skin. She sent me a cheeky grin. That can be arranged, if you ask nicely. I just quirked a brow. She chuckled and eased my boxers down, helping me step out of them. One warm hand closed around my cock, while the fingers of her other hand teased my scrotum. I stifled a groan. Good girl. Touch me. Exactly like that. I watched her mouth hover near the tip. She ran her tongue around the flare, then licked her way down to my balls and then up again. When she reached the head, she sucked me into her mouth for a second and then released me with an audible pop. A shock of electricity shot up my spine and my whole body went rigid. The hell with this. I fisted my hands in her shiny black hair and pulled her head back so that I was looking into her eyes. Suck me, star. Now. She slanted me a look up from under her thick lashes. Beg me, count. Chapter 12. Star. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was because Remy had gone all lordly on me, and then to top it off, he'd tried that compulsion shit on me. He hadn't tried that since that third night when we'd gone out to dinner together. But damn it, the man was going to Paris without me. I told myself I was only disappointed because I'd always wanted to see France, but I was going to miss him, and that pissed me off more than anything. I might be only one in a long line of courtesans, but I'd promised myself I'd never beg Remy de la Lune for anything, so I turned the tables on him. But of course, Remy didn't beg, not Monsieur le Comte. Instead, he flashed his fangs and said, "Star," in a voice that sent a shiver down my spine. I swiped my tongue up his hard cock again, teasing him. It wasn't that I didn't want to do this for him, because I did. When he'd urged me to my knees, I'd gone willingly. He was so generous about pleasuring me that I was happy to return the favor. I stroked my hand down his taut stomach, then wrapped my fingers around his erection. It jumped in my hand. I drew a slow breath, inhaling his musk. Already his scent was familiar to me, an earthy spice that made my insides knot with desire. I set my mouth to the hard, hot line of him. His whole body went tight. I smiled to myself and hummed against his cock. He groaned at the vibration. "Suck me," he ordered, his patience gone. I ignored him to trace a slow line up and down him with my tongue. He closed his eyes and muttered something in French, and my lips curved. I wanted this as much as him, but some devilish part of me made me throw his own words back at him. "Beg me, count." His fingers tightened on my hair. I took a tiny taste and he groaned again. "You know what to do," I murmured against his erection. He bit out a curse. "The hell I do. Suit yourself, but don't say I didn't warn you." I kept up the teasing licks and sucks until he speared his fingers through my hair and pulled my head back. Our eyes met. His pale, inhuman gaze seared me. "Suck me." I moistened my lips. Part of me was amazed at my boldness. This was a vampire, after all. A man who could break me like a twig if I pushed him too far. But then, I'd always had a reckless streak that even my dad hadn't been able to beat out of me. Or maybe it was because of those beatings that sometimes I just didn't fucking care. And besides, I was certain Remy wouldn't hurt me. Not physically, anyway. I had an instinct for that kind of violence. The kind that preys on small, helpless things, and I didn't sense it in Remy, however dangerous he was otherwise. His gaze was on my mouth. I waited until he brought his eyes back to mine again, and then gave him my best innocent look and murmured, "I'm waiting." He regarded me through slit lids, and I suppressed a shiver. But that reckless streak wouldn't let me back down. He made a low, feral sound. "Damn you, woman. I don't know why I put up with this." Then he rocked his pelvis against my lips and growled, "Please, good enough." I put my mouth on him and sucked him inside. He hissed and said, "Good girl," which for some reason made me hotter. His hands came to my head, holding me in place as he slowly rocked in and out of my mouth. "Fuck, you feel so tight." He'd lost his smooth tones. His voice was harsh, gritty, and I was so damn proud that I'd made him lose control. And then he switched to French again, and I liked that even more. I settled in to suck him in earnest. I could tell he was almost there when he stopped me, and he drew me back up. He jerked off my clothes and then said in a soft voice, "On your hands and knees." When I obeyed, he came to his knees behind me, grabbed my hips, and took me there on the carpet. Hard and wild, I pressed against him, nearly sobbing with pleasure. "That's it," he said, thrusting in and out of me. "You are so beautiful. I want you too much. All the time." "Yes," I moaned. "Say, you're mine." He fisted a hand in my hair and pulled it back. "Say it, woman. Say, you're mine. Mine only." I bit my lip. Sweat beaded on my spine. "Yes," I cried to the hard rhythm of his thrusts as he rammed into me. "Yes. Yes. I'm yours. I'm yours." Remy buried his teeth in the side of my neck, and I screamed as pleasure shot from my head to my toes. "I'm yours." I collapsed on the carpet, Remy next to me. As I dragged in a breath, I finally understood why those other courtesans had been willing to beg. A man like Remy could become an addiction. True to his word, Remy ordered Malik to turn one of the unused bedrooms into a studio, and the other man made a few phone calls, and it was done by noon the next day. To my surprise, Remy left Malik behind to guard me. I objected. Anyone but Malik. But Remy only gave me a hard kiss, told me to behave myself, and left. I told myself I'd imagined that looked, but I'd survived my dad. I'd learned to be hypersensitive to atmosphere and expressions. Malik definitely didn't like me. What I didn't understand was why, until it occurred to me he was jealous of me and Remy. I'd figured a vampire was always like this with his courtesan. But maybe Remy did find me special. I shrugged off Malik's dislike. What did it matter? In another 10 days I'd be gone, and Malik would have his master to himself again, until Remy hired the next courtesan, which I refused to think about. Malik wasn't any happier to be left behind than I was to have him guarding me. But the man was a professional. Other than checking in with me twice a day to make sure I had everything I needed, and trailing me whenever I left the hotel, I didn't see him. Meanwhile, I had a studio to die for. Remy must have told Malik to get me one of everything in the store, because when the order arrived, it was 3 times what I'd asked for. Easels, canvases of every size, tubes and tubes of acrylic paint, brushes in a range of shapes and sizes. There was also acrylic gel and a special glue that I could use to affix photos and other objects to my paintings. The bedroom itself had large windows that let in plenty of natural light, and an electrician had installed special lights with dimmer switches so that I could adjust the inside lights as needed. I confiscated a white cotton shirt of Remy's, put on a pair of my new jeans, and got to work. For the first 2 days, I painted non-stop, only coming out of the bedroom to eat and sleep, and take a walk. At noon, it felt strange to be outside under the sunshine. I'd always been a night owl, so it hadn't been hard for me to adapt to Remy's hours. Still, it felt good to have the sun on my face. I walked for several miles each day, trailed by a scowling Malik, before heading back to the inner harbour and the hotel. The painting was going well. I did a couple of quick studies and then started on the biggest canvas, 6 feet wide and 3 feet tall. I started with deep, moody colours, navy blue, forest green, black. Next, I bought a stack of magazines and cut them into pieces, gluing glossy bits of paper here and there. It still wasn't right, so I added streaks of electric blue, like Remy's eyes when he was in full vamp mode. I was painting Remy, of course, not his physical body, but his energy, the darkness that lived in him, but also the generosity, because nothing in that contract had required him to create this studio for me, or to encourage my painting at all. For that matter, by the third day, Remy still hadn't returned and he hadn't called me once, and damn it, I missed him. I felt empty, flat without him, like the world had lost some of its colour. On top of that, I was worried, because right before he'd left, he'd said something to Malik that made me realize he was going back to France to put down a rebellion in his own clan. He'd stopped talking as soon as he'd realized I was in the room, but I'd overheard enough to realize he was walking into a civil war. I shuddered. I couldn't even imagine what war between vampires looked like. For the first 2 days, I refused to ask Malik about Remy, because no news was good news, right? On the third morning, I broke when Malik checked in with me after breakfast. I said, "Have you heard anything from Remy? Is he okay?" Malik bent enough to incline his head. "Monsieur de la Lune is well, thank you. But when will he back? I cannot say, can't or won't." Malik just stared back steadily. "You know," I said, "I'm not the enemy." But he just lifted a heavy black brow and bowed himself out of the room. I growled in frustration, and then pulled on the shirt I was using as a painting smock and strode down the hall to my studio. A large painting like this usually took me weeks, but this one poured out in a feverish burst of creativity. By the fourth day, I was almost through. That last day, I forgot everything, even food, as I tried to get Remy down on canvas. I even ripped up the sketches I'd secretly made of him one day when he was asleep and glued them here and there on the painting, forming a huge spiral that twisted toward the center, but it still needed something. I ran a hand over my hair, forgetting the paint on my fingers. And then it came to me. I grabbed my brush and added a fiery shadow at the center of the spiral. Two people, intertwined in a dark, sexy embrace, Remy and me, there. Then I stepped back and eyed it, then heaved a breath. I was done. I set down my brush and paced restlessly around the room, still humming from having made the best painting of my life. My stomach growled and I realized I was starving. I glanced at the windows. From the angle of the sun, it was close to 7 o'clock and I hadn't eaten since breakfast. I cleaned the brushes, scrubbed my hands, and did my best to get the streak of red paint out of my hair. Then I ate a big dinner before setting out for a walk. I didn't plan to go. Remy's little talk about vampires wanting his woman had convinced me to fall in with his orders. But as I entered the lobby, Malik was waiting. He nodded, back to his usual expressionless self. "Any news on Remy?" I asked. "He is fine," Malik said. "That's all you need to know." I nodded, but inside, I was boiling. 4 whole days with no word from Remy, not even a quick hi. "How are you doing?" ? And Malik was about as communicative as a concrete block. The hell with it. Suddenly all I wanted was to go home, if just for a couple of hours. After all, I'd been walking around with only Malik as a bodyguard for the past few days and nothing had happened. And besides, I wanted to stick it to Malik. Maybe that was immature, but I was coming down off a painter's high and not thinking clearly. It wasn't hard. Malik was there to protect me, not imprison me. He wasn't expecting me to give him the slip. Fortunately, I'd shoved my wallet and phone into my jeans, thinking I might do some shopping like Remy had suggested. I inserted myself into a crowd of Japanese tourists. Then, when they passed the harbor place, darted in one end of the mall and out the other. A few seconds later, I was in a taxi on my way back to my apartment. The driver dropped me on the corner. He offered to wait, but I shook my head. No thanks. I don't know how long I'll be. As I walked down the street, I looked around me. So much had happened. It seemed like I'd been gone a year, but there was my neighbour, ensconced in her usual lawn chair on her stoop, and across the street, 4 kids were kicking a soccer ball back and forth in the deepening shadows. Everything was normal, only I had changed. I reached my house and walked up the stoop, then had to knock on the door because I'd left my key in my backpack at the hotel. Fortunately, Jim was home. He gave me a hug and then stepped back to allow me in. How are you, Gun? I'm good. Jim was blonde and buff, with a cute little goatee. He raised a sandy brow, taking in my new red sweater and skinny jeans. We've been worried about you, but I see you found a sugar daddy. My cheeks heated. Art patron, I muttered. Do tell. I liked Jim, but I knew if I told him about Remy, the entire neighborhood would know by the end of the evening that I was shacking up with a vampire. It's complicated, I said with a shrug. Look, I forgot my keys, but I want to pick up a few things. Can I get the spare key from you? Sure. He went into his apartment and returned with a key a minute later. I took it and then smacked my forehead. Shit, I forgot the rent. Already been paid through the end of the year. My mouth dropped open. Guess he didn't tell you. No. Well, happy birthday and Merry Christmas. Yeah. I shook my head. How could you stay pissed off at a man like that? Well, I have to get going. I turned and ran up the stairs. Just one thing, Jim called. When will you be back for good? June 6th. I swallowed, because that wasn't so long now, and continued on up to the attic. Jim's voice floated after me, and yeah, you go girl. I gave a bark of laughter. Thanks, I yelled back. I think. Inside, my apartment smelled of stale air and turpentine. Nothing had changed, but like my street, it felt weird, like someone else had lived there. So much had happened since that night at Oakley's. I ran my gaze over the paintings propped along one wall. They weren't bad, but they didn't have the power of the one I'd done of Remy. I ran my finger over the top of the largest painting. Somehow I knew I was never going to show these, but they'd served their purpose. If I hadn't made these paintings, I'd never have been able to go deeper. Outside the windows, the sun was setting. By now, Malik had sent out an alarm. I needed to get back to the hotel before the man went apeshit. I grabbed my favorite t-shirt and jeans, the ones I usually painted in, and stuffed them into a canvas bag. I was turning to leave when I came back and got the small 8 by 10-inch painting of my mum. I'd painted it when I was still a teenager from a photo taken a few months before she died. The painting wasn't that good technically, but it was all I had to remember her by. The last time I'd seen my dad, he'd knocked me on my ass and gone looking for it, saying he was going to burn it. You think you're a fucking artist? He'd yelled, snatching up one of my sketchbooks and ripping out the sketches one by one and throwing them on the floor. You'll never be an artist. You'll never be anything but a drain on some man. Then he reached for the portrait of my mum, but I lunged past him and got to it first. No, I growled, holding it to my chest. You can't have it. He was so shocked. He went stock still. Then he roared my name, but I had already darted past him and out of the apartment. I never went back. Now I wrapped the painting carefully in another t-shirt and put it in the bag. Outside, I hurried toward Orleans Street, a major road where I could catch a taxi. As I turned the corner, I saw a familiar cropped afro ahead of me. Janelle, it was her. She turned around. Her eyes widened and then she grinned. How are you, girl? I'm okay. That's good. That's good. I wondered what happened that night at Oakley's. Oakley accused me of ripping him off. Her plucked black brows shot up. He did? Yeah, 100 grand. She blinked. You're shitting me. I didn't take it, I added, in case you're wondering. No, of course not. Not your style. She glanced at my outfit, but it looks like it worked out then. You and the vamp. I inhaled sharply. She knew about Rumi. Things fell in place with an audible snap. Janelle had been the one who recommended me for the job in a club I'd never heard about, that within days had accused me of theft, and Rumi had been right to rescue me. Suddenly, I knew. Yeah, I said, and, taking a stab in the dark, added, thanks for getting me the job. She shrugged. No thanks necessary. That dude, Malik, paid me enough. Fury punched through me. For a few moments, I couldn't breathe. I was so angry. Janelle had been in on this, and Rumi, the bastard, had set the whole thing up. I drew a jagged breath. You knew that he wanted me to be his fucking blood whore? Well, not exactly. All I had to do was tell you about the job at the club, but you knew, because why else would a vampire want me? She had the grace to look ashamed. $5,000. Star. And all I had to do was let you know about that job at the club, and then swear never to tell you how you got it. But I wouldn't have done it if I hadn't thought it was for your own good. You know you needed the money. Hell, for the kind of money a vamp pays, I'd have done it myself. But Malik said that Delaloon wanted you, and you took the money over me. We're friends, Janelle. At least I thought we were. What was the harm? I didn't know anything about you getting beat on. I bet that wasn't the vamp's idea. No, I agreed bitterly. Rumi wouldn't want his dinner harmed. She set her hands on her hip. What are you so pissed off about? You could have just said no. No, I snarled. I couldn't. Oakley, or Malik, set it up to look like I'd ripped the club off for 100 grand. I had one day to come up with the money. One fucking day. Janelle blinked. Then she scowled back. Well, anyway, looks like the vamp treats you good. I mean, those are designer jeans, girlfriend. And I bet he gave you a whole cloth. That's not the point. You set me up. My fists clenched. I was a heartbeat away from knocking her on her ass. Friends don't do that to friends. Okay. She raised her palms and backed away. Calm down. I'm sorry. All right? Fuck sorry. I dug my fingernails into my palms and took a deep breath. I wanted to slap her silly, but she wasn't the one I was really angry at. You know what, Janelle? Just go to hell. I strode off, so pissed off at Janelle, Rumi, and the rest of them that my chest was a tight, seething knot. I reached Orleans Street and turned east, forgetting all about catching a taxi. It was completely dark now, but I barely noticed. I turned south toward the inner harbor. I had walked halfway back when I realized I didn't have to return at all. I had Rumi's bonus. I could just take it and run. It would serve the son of the bitch right. Tears pricked my eyes. I swiped them angrily away. How could I have let myself believe that Rumi Delaloon was anything but a beautiful, lying snake? Whatever Oakley had done, Rumi had been behind it. Oh, Malik had done the dirty work, but at Rumi's orders, because someone had to have doctored the video to make it look like I had stolen that money. I shook my head. God, I was stupid. The man had moved me around like a chess piece. How could I have been so blind not to see it? Rumi Delaloon had wanted me from that first morning on my stoop. He was rich and had the resources needed to hire the best hackers in the world, not to mention Malik's unquestionable loyalty to him. And to think I'd been missing him. My stomach clenched. I wasn't just an idiot. I was a pathetic, Lovesick idiot. I'd almost reached the inner harbour. I could see the rooftop of Rumi's hotel from here. My chin shot up. Fuck you, I growled and marched forward. I was not going to slink away as if I were the lying, sneaking son of a bitch. I was going to have it out with Rumi, and then I was going to leave. By now it was late enough that the downtown area had emptied of office workers, and all the tourists were either at dinner or in their hotels. Suddenly, I realized I was the only one on this particular block. My skin prickled warily. I was passing a parking garage illuminated only by two small red lights, signaling it was closed. I hurried past the entrance. Steps sounded inside the garage. I whipped my head around to see two men in black suits moving toward me. Hell, I broke into a run, but barely got a few yards when one of them somehow appeared in front of me. At the same time, a hand clamped on my shoulder from behind and jerked me to a halt. I froze, breathing hard. The man in front gave a slow smile that froze me to the marrow. "Good evening, signorina," he said in a thick Italian accent. "I have been looking for you." Chapter 13. Rumi. I was on my feet the instant the jet touched down at the Baltimore airport. I'd left Paris bone-weary, not tired, as a vampire. I wasn't prone to such a human weakness, just weary with my life, and what it sometimes required of me. The trouble in Paris had been traced to two of my top people. One a woman I'd turned myself 300 years ago. I'd had to kill them both. I'd done it unflinchingly. It was the mommy, but it had left a bad taste in my mouth. Before they died, I'd compelled them to tell me the whole story. They'd fought the compulsion with everything they had, but I was stronger and angry. The man behind this was an Italian named Lorenzo who'd been turned just a few years after me. My clan was made up of 5 governors, and Lorenzo was lord of a branch on the Italian-French border. But Lorenzo wanted it all. I'd wasted a whole day hunting the SOB until I learned he'd gone to ground somewhere in Italy. This wasn't over. As far as I was concerned, Lorenzo was a dead man. But while my people traced him, I left for the States, eager to get back to Star. I hadn't fed since I'd left her, save for a couple of bottles of prepackaged blood. My spirited little courtesan had ruined me for other women. Now all I wanted to do was sink myself into her warm, welcoming body, and feed my beast, and I were in complete agreement. We needed Star. Now, I pressed the intercom button. "Faster," I told the chauffeur. "Yes, sir." I sat back and waited impatiently as he drove the few miles remaining to the hotel. The bond between Star and myself had grown while I'd been away. I had sensed it even in France. But now, as the limo headed into Baltimore, it strengthened with every mile. My fangs lengthened in anticipation. I would take her to bed, and then tell her the good news. My men had traced her father to the Philippines. We had him now. I'd ordered them to find him and bring him to France. I intended to keep my promise to her, but Tommy Salazar was going to pay for every bruise he'd ever put on her, outside and inside. Malik met me in the lobby. "Monsieur." His big fists were balled. I knew something was wrong, but I wasn't in the mood for anything but Star right now. "Later," I snapped, but Monsieur Malik hurried after me into the elevator. "This is important." "What?" The doors closed behind us, and I hit the button for the top floor. "It's about Mademoiselle Salazar." I swung my head in his direction. "Talk," I said in a low, dangerous voice. Sweat beaded on his broad forehead. What? My hand was around his throat before I realized I'd moved. I gave him a hard shake. "What the fuck did you do?" He met my eyes. "Nothing, monsieur, I swear." She she just disappeared. We went outside for her walk, and the next thing I knew she was gone. I had a second man as backup that even she didn't know about, but somehow she got away from both of us. My heart clenched. I knew damn well Malik didn't like Star, but hell, he didn't like anyone who grew too close to me. But I also knew through the blood bond that Malik would do whatever it took to keep her safe, which is why I'd left him in charge of her protection. Now I inhaled slowly, testing his scent for lies, just in case. But he was telling the truth. I shoved him away, disgusted, when, about 90 minutes ago, I snarled and he hurried to say, "I have 5 men out looking for her." I bit out a curse. Damn that woman. I should have set that compulsion on her so she couldn't leave the hotel, or at least, so she'd feel compelled to stay near Malik at all times. But no, I'd been weak when she told me to stop. I had. The woman was in serious trouble. When I found her, she was going to be lucky if I didn't turn her over my knee and spank some sense into her. But first I had to find her. I slammed my hands onto the elevator buttons. We lurched to a stop at the 4th floor. I flew out of the elevator and toward the stairs, my whole self focused on the bond linking me to Star. Then it wavered. I concentrated harder. God damn it to hell. Someone else was feeding on her. My whole body went cold. "Call off your men," I ordered Malik, who was close on my heels. "There's nothing they can do. A vampire has her, maybe more than one. And then stand by in the limousine. I'll let you know where to come as soon as I find her, because I would find her, or die trying." I was in the stairwell now. I swung over the railing, dropped the 4 stories to the ground floor, and raced through the foyer at vampire fast speed past a couple of open-mouthed hotel guests. I hit the street at a full outrun. She was about 2 miles away. At this speed, if I could cover the distance in 5 minutes, I prayed to the dark gods that would be fast enough, because I had a bad feeling I'd discovered where Lorenzo had gone after France. Chapter 14. Star. The 2 vampires bundled me into a black sedan and headed west. Smart. West Baltimore had neighborhoods where you could shoot a man dead in front of a dozen witnesses and no one would admit to having seen a thing. We stopped at a red light and I surreptitiously felt for the door handle. Her chilly hand descended on my thigh. I wouldn't if I were you. It was the Italian vampire, the one who seemed to be in charge. He had olive skin and the golden brown eyes of a wolf. The other man was at the wheel. He had pale skin and British features, and hadn't spoken except to say, "Yes, sir," or "No, sir." The Italian vampire stroked my thigh. His fangs gleamed in the shadows and I froze. I knew that meant he was preparing to feed. "You wouldn't get 2 meters before I'd be on you," he added. "But be my guest. I like to chase my prey." I dragged in a breath and released the handle. We drove down an unlit alley and stopped behind a decrepit warehouse. The parking lot was illuminated by a single weak light. A dumpster at one end of the lot spilled over with trash, and all 3 loading dock doors sported graffiti. The driver clicked a remote and the middle door lifted with a screech of metal. We drove inside and the door clanged back to the ground, leaving us in darkness save for a ring of amber-tinted lights around the warehouse's perimeter. Not that there was anything to see. The large, cave-like interior was empty except for us. The vampire reached across me to open the door. "After you, Signorina Salazar." He knew my name. Her chill ran down my spine. I'd been too busy thinking about escape to wonder why I'd been kidnapped. But now I realized this hadn't been random. These men had been after me. The driver got out of the car, but I stayed right where I was. "Who are you?" "Lorenzo, Lord Lorenzo." The Count spoke of me. Perhaps I shook my head. Never heard of you. Lorenzo didn't like that. With a scowl, he slid past me and exited the car, and then reached in for me. His hands settled on my upper arms, and I flinched at how cold they were. Unlike Remy, he either didn't bother to warm his skin, or couldn't. It was like being touched by a dead man. Come. I planted my feet on the car floor and grabbed the handle above the door, but he plucked me out as easily as if I were a child. The next instant, I was up against the side of the car and he was yanking my hair out of the way. His mouth descended, fangs extended. My heart skittered. No. I shoved against his chest and broke away, but he was on me before I got 2 feet. I panicked, screaming and wrenching myself from side to side, but he was too strong. When I came back to myself, he had me pinned against the car, wrists on either side of my head. He eyed me with a feral expression that made my skin crawl. Delicious. He inhaled deeply. I can't wait to taste you. I may keep you around a few days just to feed from you. I swallowed dryly and lifted my chin. Remy will come after me. If you're smart, you'll let me go now and then get the hell out of here. Now, of course he'll come after you. Lorenzo's mouth touched my throat. I'm counting on it. His teeth tore into my skin. It was like being stabbed by 2 red-hot pokers. I gasped and whipped my head from side to side, trying to dislodge him, but he was too strong. His hands clamped on my wrists like manacles, and he sucked harder. For a few endless seconds, I was paralyzed. Beneath the terror, I was stunned at how different this was from when Remy had fed. I hadn't realized until then how careful he'd been. Then somehow I summoned up the strength to fight him. I bucked against his body. Get off me, he grunted, but his grip on my right wrist loosened. I wrenched it free and raked my fingernails down his cheek. He growled, but didn't stop feeding, just grabbed my wrist again and used his body to hold me immobile against the car. He ground his cock against my belly and I knew it was only a matter of time before he dragged off my jeans. I could feel myself weakening. Remy, I heard myself say from somewhere far away. Then again, more strongly, Remy, because I knew he was back in Baltimore and that he was looking for me. The blood bond he'd spoken of flared up within me. Lorenzo lifted his head. His eyes were glowing gold, his lips stained red. He looked like the predator from hell. I shrank back against the car, too terrified even to scream. Call him, he taunted. That's a good little human. Call him to me. I clamped my mouth shut. He laughed and sank his teeth into me again, drinking deeply. 2 dark shapes moved behind him, and I realized there were 2 other vamps in the garage. With the driver, they made a half circle around us, eyeing me with bright, avid eyes, obviously waiting their turn to feed. A sense of doom filled me. I no longer had the energy to struggle. I was going to die here in this cold, desolate garage. Dark spots danced before my eyes. I bucked against Lorenzo in a last attempt to push him away, and then slumped against the car. He growled and, without lifting his face from my throat, shifted me higher so he could keep feeding. There was a sound at the warehouse entrance. The middle door blew open and fell to the concrete floor in a crash that reverberated throughout the cavernous space. Lorenzo cursed and lifted his mouth from me. My breath sobbed out. With my last ounce of energy, I turned my head to see Remy striding into the warehouse like an avenging angel in a sleek grey suit. Then everything went black. Chapter 15. Remy. I halted in front of the warehouse and eyed the 3 closed doors. A vampire has to be invited into another's lair or private home, but the warehouse was public. I didn't sense the invisible barrier that would have kept me out. I rammed into the center door and knocked it to the floor with a combination of magic and sheer vampire strength. As I strode inside, I was dimly aware of 3 other men, all vampires, but my vision narrowed in on Star and Lorenzo. The bastard had her, my woman, my Star, up against a black car and was feeding from her like a beast. The scent of her blood filled the air and her head hung limply to the side. Even from here I could see her skin was sallow from loss of blood. How long? How long? A red haze filled my head. I growled and started across the warehouse. Lorenzo raised his head and looked at me, his mouth dripping with Star's blood. Get him. The 3 other vampires emerged from the shadows, coming at me from different directions. With a start, I realized they were the 3 vampires who had been at the Ricker Art Gallery that night. Either Charles Ricker was part of this, or his coven had its own traitors. Either way, these men were dead. I growled. You fools think even 3 of you are a match for my strength. And then they were on me. The first man flew through the air at me. I spun around and aimed a kick at his chest, punching a hole in it. Blood spurted everywhere. As he dropped to the floor, the second man jumped me. I met him full on, with a twist of my body. I had him in a headlock. A second later, I ripped his head off. The only sure way to kill a vampire. The third man came at me. I willed my fingernails to lengthen, plunged my hand into his chest and ripped out his heart. I threw it across the warehouse and then grabbed him and tore off his head as well. That left the man on the floor. The hole in his chest had slowed him down, not killed him. He was already regenerating. But Lorenzo had dragged Star to the back of the warehouse. As I looked up, covered with his thug's blood, he disappeared with her through a trapdoor in the floor. My snarl ripped through the warehouse. I stomped another hole in the man's chest. I'd deal with him later, and launched myself into the air. The trapdoor closed in my face. I dug my nails into it and tore it off. A rickety metal staircase yawned before me. I could see Lorenzo 2 stories down, Star struggling weakly in his grasp. Another story below them was a red door. It had all the signs of a vampire's lair. Perhaps one of the men I'd killed. Terror sliced through me. If it was a lair, I couldn't enter unless invited. Lorenzo would be free to feed from her while I raged outside, powerless to stop him. No, I roared. Even with my preternatural speed, I couldn't spare the time it would take to run down the steps. I dove headfirst down the stairwell after them. Lorenzo was 2 steps from the red door when I landed in a crouch in front of him. He blanched and tossed Star aside. She somehow managed to land on her feet. She wobbled and sank to the floor. The man had fucking drained her. My beast rose up in me. I growled and leapt for Lorenzo. We grappled for several long moments. He was nearly my equal in power, but I was fighting for not just my life, but Star's. He managed to get on top for a few seconds and then Star whimpered. The hell with this. I rose, with Lorenzo still on me, and swung him headfirst into one of the steel pillars supporting the staircase. His skull crumpled like an eggshell, but he merely snarled, strong from feeding on Star, swiped the blood from his eyes and leapt at me again. I grabbed him and turned, letting his momentum send him to the floor. He landed on his stomach, me on his back. I slammed my knee into his spine. It severed with an audible crack. Lorenzo groaned. No, I wrapped my arm around his head and tore it off. It was over. The only sound in the stairwell was Star's jagged breath. I dropped Lorenzo's head on the floor and went to her. My darling, my little love. I took her in my arms and crooned to her. You are all right? I patted her face, her body. She nodded weakly against my shoulder. Then she let out a sob. Oh, God, she rasped. It hurt. His teeth dot my throat. He's dead. Her breath shuddered in. She looked up at me with sunken eyes. Hurts. My heart constricted, because this was all my fault. If I hadn't been so determined to have her at any cost, she'd still be safe in her own world. I cradled her closer. No, Mommy, I know. Here. I sank my fangs into my wrist and pressed it to her lips. Drink. It will make you better. She closed her eyes and turned her face away. Her pulse stuttered, grew weaker. Fear swamped me. Drink. I infused my voice with a strong compulsion and nudged her mouth with my wrist. She tried to keep her mouth shut, but she was too weak. I managed to get a few drops into her and she swallowed thirstily. It wasn't much, but at least her heartbeat steadied. I came to my feet and started back up the stairs. Star cradled in my arms. You're all right now, my heart. No one's going to hurt you. Tears slipped down her face. I thought he was going to. Hush now. I stroked her hair. I'm sorry. So sorry. I should have realized he'd have men watching me, even here in Baltimore. She briefly met my eyes and I gulped. She knew. I probed the blood bond and she visibly cringed from me. Something inside me broke at that. Star? She closed her eyes. I'm tired. Yes, of course. I only want you to know you're safe now. He was the last one, and all 3 of his top men are dead, too. No one else will dare challenge me after this. She gave a tiny nod. We reached the top of the staircase and emerged into the warehouse. Star's chest heaved and her head fell to the side. For the first time I saw the gash the bastard had ripped in her neck. His saliva had healed her as he fed, else she would have bled out. I growled low in my throat. If I could have killed Lorenzo a second time, I would have. Her pulse was erratic again. I fought down panic. Here. I brought my wrist to her lips. Drink some more. She shook her head. Don't want drink, I said with all the power of my command. I promise. I won't give you enough to change you. She gave a little sob, but I pressed my blood on her until she sighed and gave in. That's it, I murmured as she took a few drops. Take all you need. Make yourself strong again. When she was done, she closed her eyes and rested her head against my chest. I could feel her hurt and anger and distrust through the bond, and it made my stomach clench. I dug out my phone and called Malik. I have Star. She's alive, but injured. Come immediately. I gave him the address and then walked with her to the front of the warehouse to wait. Star had fallen into a healing sleep, my magical blood working to heal her. I pressed a kiss to the top of her head and stared out into the night. I'd thought my heart was too old and cold to break. I was wrong, because I'd fallen in love with a young, fragile human in my arms, and she had every reason to hate me. Chapter 16. Star. When we got back to the hotel, Remy urged some juice and crackers on me, and then tried to get me to go to bed. But I was covered with blood and desperate to be clean. I want a shower, I said fretfully. He nodded and carried me straight to the bathroom, where he shucked his clothes and then, after helping me undress, took me into the shower. He had to hold me up because my legs were like wet noodles. With his other hand, he picked up a washcloth and gently scrubbed the blood away. As I watched the rust-colored water disappear down the drain, I began to shiver uncontrollably. Remy swung me into arms again and, taking me back to bed, spooned himself around me and did something that made his body a mini furnace. I stiffened, but I was too weak to fight him. Heat seeped into me and I relaxed again. I wanted to snuggle up against him, but I couldn't forget how he tricked me into this whole thing. I was so tired though. Finally, I turned over and laid my head on his chest. because I needed to be held, and even knowing what Rumi had done, he felt like home and God. I hated myself for that. He murmured something against my hair and gathered me carefully into his arms. Gradually the shivers stopped, and I fell into a deep sleep. When I woke up, Rumi had left the bed and was talking to Malik in hushed French. I didn't understand what they were saying, but I heard my name, and damn if Malik didn't sound concerned. Then Rumi noticed I was up. He gave me some more juice and crackers, and then helped me to the bathroom, and then tucked me back into bed again and sat on a nearby chair. Malik approached the bed on the other side. I looked at him through slit lids, half expecting him to smirk at me. The man had made no secret of the fact that he'd love to get rid of me, but all he did was touch my shoulder. Get better, Mademoiselle. I want you to know I'm sorry for my part in this. What happened at Oakley's? I jerked my chin, because after all, he'd only acted on Rumi's orders. Next time, I rasped, I'll take you out myself. See if I don't. The man actually smiled, and his face didn't crack. I know you will, but I promise there will not be a next time. He leaned closer and whispered, you were good for him. How about that? I'd finally been accepted. Guess you had to nearly get killed for the man to trust you. I rolled my eyes and fell back asleep. For the next couple of days, I spent most of the time sleeping, but whenever I awoke, Rumi was there, urging me to eat and drink. Then suddenly, my eyes popped open and I was wide awake. I touched my neck and was surprised to find the gash almost healed. I tried stretching next, and when nothing hurt, pushed myself to sitting. There was a movement on the bed next to me. I turned to see Rumi, his eyes glowing faintly in the gloom. Good afternoon, Star. It's afternoon. What day? He told me, and I realized I'd been in bed for almost 2 days. Rumi got out of bed and turned on the light before pulling up a chair next to me. You are better? Yeah, but I need a shower. His gaze ran over me. Will you be all right? I think so. Yeah, good. That is good. There was an awkward pause. Okay, I said, let's try this. I swung my feet to the floor. I sat there a minute to make sure, but the dizziness that had affected me for the past couple of days was gone. Although my throat felt like sandpaper, I swallowed dryly. Rumi was right there with a glass of orange juice. Here, this will nourish you. I nodded and took a sip. The juice was fresh, squeezed with a mint garnish on top. It tasted like nectar of the gods. I drank thirstily, not stopping until the glass was drained. Rumi took the glass from me. Some more, perhaps? No, thanks. He went to help me rise, but I shrank back. I can do it, of course. Something flickered at the back of his eyes, something that looked like hurt, but I was damned if I was going to feel bad. He inclined his head. I'll order you something to eat while you're in the shower. Thank you, I said, and headed for the bathroom. I was starving and my body still ached in multiple spots, but compared to 2 nights ago, I felt amazingly good. Rumi's magical blood had done the trick. I took my time in the shower, washing my hair and scrubbing my body multiple times, especially my neck. I didn't want a single cell of Lorenzo on me. When I finally felt clean, I just stood there, letting the hot water wash over me. When I was finished, I pulled on a red silk button-up shirt and a pair of jeans. I needed clothes for this talk. Rumi was waiting for me in the sitting room. He had switched on a couple of lights and put on a short black bathrobe. As I entered the room, he came to his feet. You look better, ma petite. Not so pale. For a while there, I was worried. I'm tougher than I look. He nodded gravely. I know you are. I scrutinized him in turn. For a vampire, He didn't look so good. He was gaunt and hollow-eyed, his skin whiter than I'd ever seen it. My heart twisted. I scowled and jerked my gaze from his face. "Sit, please." He indicated a small table which held another glass of juice, a covered plate, and a single perfect sunflower in a green glass vase. "We will talk, I promise, but first, you need to eat." I hesitated, but he was right. I felt much better, but I knew I needed to eat some solid food. Magical cure or not, Lorenzo had about sucked me dry. I needed to replace the blood I'd lost. I took a seat at the table and removed the silver cover. He'd ordered me eggs Chesapeake, a variation on eggs Benedict made with crab meat instead of Canadian bacon. The first time I'd ordered it from room service, Remy had chuckled, saying Marylanders would put crab on anything. But after that, he made sure I had it whenever I wanted. I bit my lip, so the man was being nice, ordering my favorite brunch, getting me another sunflower. That didn't mean he wasn't a manipulative SOB, but I couldn't resist running a finger down one of the sunflower's bright yellow petals. Remy poured himself a glass of wine, took the seat across from me and watched as I ate my way through most of the eggs and a side of hash browns. He did his best to start a conversation, but when I only replied in short syllables, he stopped talking and watched me eat. I can usually enjoy my food under any circumstances, but that meal tasted like chopped up cardboard. At last I was finished. I set down the fork and knife, wiped my mouth and stood up. Remy came to his feet at the same time. Before I could speak, he scraped a hand over his wavy black hair. "You know, don't you?" I crossed my arms over my chest. "That you arranged all of this? Made it look like I stole from Oakley so that I'd have to become your whore?" He winced. "I wouldn't call you that, but who?" His gaze was watchful. I could tell he wasn't sure how to handle me. "Good. You're a low-down, dirty snake," I said in even tones. "I don't know how you sleep at night, or the day, whatever." He briefly closed his eyes. "I never meant for them to hurt you. When I saw those marks on your face, I was furious. They paid for that. I promise you, Oakley and Antoine both, and Malik as well. He should have made it clear that you were not to be hurt, and that makes it all right." My voice rose. "You think that beating on someone can make this better?" I thought they were going to kill me, Remy, and then to save myself, I sold my body to a fucking stranger. So no, that doesn't make it right. Not at all. He opened his mouth and then shut it again. "You are correct. I was wrong and I must beg your pardon. He spread his hands. "I believed I was helping you. You needed the money, but that is not an excuse. Please, forgive me." I blinked. I hadn't expected an apology, not from Remy de la Lune, but it was too little, too late. My mouth twisted. "I trusted you when you gave Oakley that money. I thought you were nice. Sure, you were getting something out of it. But $150,000 is a hell of a lot of money to pay for anything." But my voice broke. "But you aren't any different from my dad." His chin jerked up as if I'd struck him. Star. I fisted my hands. "Don't say a word. Not one fucking word. You may not smack women around, but you moved me around like some kind of effing pawn." He regarded me a long moment. "You are correct. All I can say is that I regret it very much." Tears squeezed from my eyes. I swiped them away. "Well, I don't forgive you." He inclined his head. "Very well." He went to his desk and got his copy of our contract. "You are free to go," he said as he handed it to me. "It's void. Tear it to pieces. Burn it. Whatever you wish." I unfolded it and looked at his signature. "In the shower, this is what I decided. I demand Remy tear up the contract, and then I tell the sneaky son of a bitch to eat my dust. But now I felt strangely hollow inside. I crumpled the contract in my hand. I didn't read the effing thing, you know. You could have told me I had to tap dance naked in a bar and I would have believed you. He snorted like hell. Our eyes met and his flashed the intense silver blue that meant his vampire was to the fore. I waited for him to grab me and tell me I wasn't going anywhere, but he shoved his hands into the pockets of his robe and jerked his head at the door. Go then, you already have the money. I deposited another 100,000 to reimburse you for your troubles. I gritted my teeth. For God's sake, Remy, I don't want your damn money. I blew out a breath. The hell with this. I'm going. I was almost at the door when he said, I saw that painting you did. Yeah? I said without looking at him. It's good. Very good. If you wish, I will send it to an art dealer I know in New York. I'm sure she will be happy to show it. Not Charles Ricker. He is indisposed at the moment. Some of his coven was involved in your kidnapping, and the whole coven is currently under house arrest while we sort out who knew what. I see. Well, thank you, but I can handle it myself. Just send it to my apartment, of course. Suddenly he was right behind me. I could smell his familiar earthy spice. I inhaled shakily. I had the bad feeling I'd never forget it. Remy's hands hovered over my shoulders, but he brought them back down without touching me. May I ask you something? I shook my head no, but he spoke anyway. In your painting, was that me? And you? I shut my eyes. Yes, that is how you see me. I shrugged. I can be that man. Star. I would like another chance. I don't deserve it. But, no, you don't. But I turned to face him. He was so beautiful, even haggard as he was. A beautiful, sexy beast that could make my whole body heat with one hot, dark look. My fingers itched to touch his stubbled jaw. I curled them into my palm. Before you go, he said, I almost forgot. Your father. My men found him. I stilled. And he's dead. Star. Dead? I shook my head. Number. I don't believe it. It's true. 2 of my best men confirmed it. He went back to the Philippines and got into a bar fight. Someone stabbed him. He died over a year ago. I dragged a trembling hand over my face. Fuck. Star? Remy held out his arms. Forgive me for telling you this way, but I wanted you to know. I dropped the contract and walked into his hard chest. His arms closed around me and he held me tightly as I cried all over his silk robe. It's okay, ma petite, he murmured. It's okay. He was an Phil's debut, but he was your father. I shook my head against his chest. It didn't seem possible. Tommy Salazar had been the monster under the bed ever since I could remember. I inhaled jaggedly. You don't understand. I'm not crying because he was my father. I'm crying because I'm relieved. I'm fucking relieved that he's dead. That my own father is dead. I looked up at him. What does that make me? He cupped my face. A survivor. Star. You're a survivor, and don't you dare feel guilty about that. That man, he doesn't deserve it. He was never a father to you. Maybe you're right. I don't know. I pushed against his chest and he released me. I need to clean up, I muttered and went into the bathroom to blow my nose and wash my face. When I was done, I stood there for a long time, hands on the counter, tears dripping down my face. I hadn't lied. I was relieved that my father was dead, but I was also so sad, and I didn't even know why. Maybe because I was mourning the father I should have had, not the one I did have. When I was done, I felt empty inside, but cleansed as well. I would never remember my father with love, or even affection, but maybe I could stop hating him someday. Remy knocked on the door. Star, you are okay? Yeah. I splashed some more water on my face and emerged from the bathroom. Remy was waiting in the sitting room. He had picked up the contract and smothered it out. As he handed it to me, he said, I want you to know that the blood bond, after you walk out of here, I'll never use it on you. This I promise. Although you will live a longer life than normal, you're not a vampire, but with as much blood as you've drunk from me, you've gained a touch of my immortality. You will stay young a long time. I shook my head. I'd think about that later when I was alone. I glanced at Remy. With every day we'd spent together, I'd been able to read him better. The bond worked both ways, or at least it did with the two of us. So I knew he was telling the truth, although that was all I knew, because at this moment, when I'd have given my whole bonus to know what the man was thinking, he was so controlled. I had no frigging idea. So, I said, this is it? I'll never see you again? That's correct. This I can promise you. After you walk out of this hotel, we will never cross paths again. I glanced at the contract and then back at him. So we're even. I don't owe you a thing. None. He swallowed. None. It is I who owe you. He brushed a finger down my cheek and stepped back. Have a good life, ma petite. I nodded. I could go back to my apartment. With the money Remy had given me, I could paint full time for the next 4 or 5 years, and by then, with any luck, I'd have started selling my work. I should have been excited, but I saw myself alone in that apartment, painting day and night, and all I felt was depressed. I turned the contract over in my hands. That cry had been cleansing in more than one way, releasing the hurt and anger I felt at not just my father, but at Remy. Now I thought about the last few weeks. Yeah, the man had been a self-serving SOB, but I had to admit he'd been good to me. Even that first night, he'd been so careful, easing my fears and barely sipping from me. Now that I'd been fed on by another vampire, I realized what restraint Remy had shown. He'd even gone after the monster for me, and I didn't mean Lorenzo, but my father, because I knew that if Tommy Salazar hadn't been dead already, Remy would have made him wish he was. Finally, I thought of the studio Remy had created for me down the hall. The way he'd encourage me to make art, something no other man had done, ever. Star? Remy was staring at me, resigned, and yet hopeful. I met his eyes and then slowly and deliberately tore the contract in half, then in half again, and again until I had a handful of tiny pieces. I opened my hand and let them fall to the floor. Remy's brows drew together. He glanced at the confetti I'd made of the contract and back at me. I don't owe you anything, I repeated. I wanted that clear. Mommy? His throat worked and his control slipped. I felt a rush of confusion and tenderness. That was all I needed. I moved the few feet between us and entwined my arms around his neck. But what about Oakley? You were not mad. But his arms were around me, holding me tight against him. Hell, yeah, I'm mad, but I shouldn't have said that about you and my dad. Number, you were right. I was no better, arranging it so that you had no choice but to become my courtesan. I thought only of myself, and it was wrong. My only excuse is that I wanted you so very much. I shook my head. Number, you're nothing like my dad. You build me up, Remy. Buy me art supplies. Encourage my painting. My dad laughed at my art. He said I swallowed. He said they looked like something a drunk chicken would scratch out, and then he tried to burn them. Remy muttered something nasty in French. He caressed my face. He was an idiot. Star. Or perhaps he was full crazy. I nodded and feathered my fingers through his silky black hair. I don't want to think about him anymore. None. Then I will make you forget him. I suppressed a grin. The arrogant Rumi was already returning, but he was the man I'd fallen in love with. I nipped his chin. He went rigid, but I could tell it was because he was trying not to throw me on the mattress and take me right there. Make love to me, I murmured. Not because I have to do it, but because I want you to. You're sure? But his mouth was on mine before I could answer. I closed my eyes and kissed him back. His mouth moved over mine, slow and sure and delicious. My knees turned to jelly and he gathered me closer. Oh, yeah, I said when I could speak again. Very sure, Manamo. A broken mutter against my neck. Jutayim. His teeth scraped my skin. Pleasure seared me from my head to my toes. God, I'm hungry for you, he muttered. You're like a fever for me. I can't get enough of you. Then feed from me. Patitru and petty gout. His lips teased my throat. Then he shook his head. Number. It's too soon. You need more time to recover. Whatever you say, Count. He swung me into his arms and gazed down at me with hot blue eyes. Say it, he growled. Say you love me, too. The confusion was gone, and in its place was the vampire lord, the man used to being obeyed. But I kind of liked obeying Rumi, at least in bed. That didn't mean he had to know it. I threaded my fingers through his hair and shot him a look from beneath my lids. Make me. The end.